My name is Laurel. I'm 34 years old. I was a Scientologist and I am shunned.
All right, Laurel. So, how did you come to be a Scientologist in the first place? Is this something you were born into?
I was born into it. Yeah, both of my parents got into it in their late teens or early 20s. I'm not sure exactly. Um, and they met when they were working at the church in the city that they lived in. Um, and got married and had a bunch of kids, and we all grew up in it, and they both worked at the church throughout my childhood.
Would it be safe to say, are a lot of people who are Scientologists either born into it or they come in their late teens, early 20s because they're searching and find the opportunity?
Right. I'm not entirely sure on that point. My experience, so growing up, there was like this core group of people who worked at the church, and they had, as far as I knew, had been there forever. And they were just, they were my parents' age. So they were all old. And they had just always been around, and their kids were around. And it was just like there were other people who kind of like came in and left, but there was always just this core group. And I think a lot of them are still there. And then, so I did see some other people, because they do a lot of recruiting. There's a lot of like standing on the street corner and handing out flyers and trying to get people to come in to like watch an introductory video or take a personality test and that kind of thing. And so like some people did come in through that and get interested and stick around for a while. A lot of people, came and left pretty quickly. So, and the age range of those people is kind of all over the place. So I didn't see as a kid a lot of people coming, like a lot of new faces coming and sticking around. So I don't know how they get in and get stuck.
I had to ask because I knew they did like the personality tests,
Yeah.
and that seems like something that would greatly interest young people who are, maybe starting to explore life and trying to figure out who they are. And a free personality test of whatever type, advertised on the
Yeah.
street or whatever, can be pretty interesting to people.
Yeah. And they don't put the word Scientology on it. So it's, yeah, what you come into the Church of Scientology to do it, but when you're just standing there, it's just a free personality. But of course, you're on the same street corner every day, in and out, and people know what it is. When I was a kid, the staff at the church had like quotas to meet about like how many people they brought in or how many flyers they handed out. So they would get kids who were just like hanging around the church whose parents worked on staff. They would be like, come help me with flyers. And so would like spend hours out there doing other people's work. But like under 10, standing on the street corners, handing out flyers for the church. And people were, I mean, a lot of people were polite and just kind of politely declined or politely took it like you would anything. But some people were pretty rude. Like they knew what it was and they were sick of hearing about it.
As a former Jehovah's Witness, I think I can relate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Handing out literature.
Yeah.
Or knocking on doors.
That's so funny. I've like thought of so many connections between JW and Scientology, but that was not one of the ones that I thought of. But yeah.
Oh yeah, and kids are great because who's going to say no to a child? Obviously, some kid. We've all been there, but children are great to put out there as the face of your organization, just handing out leaflets, pamphlets, magazines, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid being like proud, like I wanted to be the face. I wanted people to like look at me and be like, wow, look at that little kid. She's dedicated. This must be a good thing. So I was like, really hoping that they would like be inspired by my dedication as this little 8-year-old and want to become part of it because of me.
Yeah, well, it makes you feel special.
Really.
And it's something that I think all of us as kids, I mean, a lot of us did hate going door to door as Jehovah's Witnesses, but it did still make you feel like you had this thing that other people needed, and to
Hmm.
think somebody would come into, in our case, the truth, and learn the one right way to paradise. You know, that would have been a big accomplishment. So for you, um, what was the pitch? You know, for us, it was we were going to help you serve the one true God and eventually, achieve the paradise earth. So, how did you see the world? How did you see things playing out that you were selling? And then also, how did you see the people outside in the world?
Yeah. So the worldview that I had was, so non-Scientologists are called WOGs, which is a racist term that I believe, like I always understood it stood for worthy Oriental gentlemen. I've heard other versions, but like that's the one I grew up with. I don't know what the hell that means, but it's a racist term for an Asian person, I think. But it was used to mean just like anybody who wasn't a Scientologist, and all of those people were considered like materialistic and self-centered, and um they didn't have any sense of spirituality. They weren't striving for truth or betterment. And so there's, individuals are wogs, and then there's the wog world at large, which is just the whole world. um Everybody and every system that isn't involved in Scientology is just the wog world. And so I believed that we were definitely superior. We were better than all those materialistic TV watching drones. Um, and I I saw like government and school and doctors and definitely psychiatry and psychology as like these evil systems that were trying to corrupt people and keep them down in the mud, not let them reach any kind of enlightenment. Um, and so I believed that we had to like protect ourselves from that. And so it wasn't like we talked to those people, but it's just, you should probably keep some kind of a distance. Like you shouldn't, if you're going to have friends who aren't Scientologists, you should work on getting them involved in Scientology. And I've
So
got a pile of notes over here.
I was gonna say, so far everything you said, I have to say, I mean, it's the same. You know,
Yeah.
the distrust of the
Yeah.
systems that be, and of course, for us, they were worldly people instead of wogs,
Mhm.
and it's the exact same distrust of people and keeping your distance, and we were special, and we were going to save them. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I totally understand. I don't want to distract you from your notes if you have something you want to
Yeah.
mention, but what's the end game? So you're trying to get them into Scientology, obviously to save them, but to save them how?
Right. So the way that people are brought in is first you have to get them in the building, and then they are called raw meat. Um, and then you find out what's bothering them in their life. So like maybe they're having a tough time at work, or their relationships aren't going so well, or they're having trouble with their family, or whatever it is, you find their ruin. And then there is a little course or a book or something that you sell them to handle that. So there's like all these little introductory courses that they can study that are relatively cheap. They're like, I don't know what they are, but not in the thousands of dollars. Um, and there's there's some like good practical advice in there. There's, information about communication and like how to talk to people effectively. And there's like, actually listen, acknowledge when you've heard the other person so that they know that you heard them. Stuff like that. It's like real basic, like doesn't need to be trademarked information. And so, people find some value in that. And then that's kind of like how you get somebody in, and you do feel at that point like you're helping them in a real practical way. You found something that they needed help with and you have tools for it, and here you go, now you have tools. The bigger game is there's a bridge to total spiritual freedom, and that involves a lot of there's auditing, which is like the one-on-one counseling, dealing with each level deals with different things, but it's basically counseling. And then the other side of the bridge is training. So studying Scientology materials and learning how to become an auditor. So those two sides of the bridge kind of go hand in hand. You're in theory supposed to do them simultaneously. A lot of people don't. It's not required. But the idea is that once you are audited all the way to the top of the bridge and you have trained all the way to the top of the bridge, you will be this it's called an operating thetan. Thetan is basically a soul. So we are all soul spiritual beings. So we're thetans, we have bodies. And an operating thetan is completely at cause over, or it's like in control over matter, energy, space, and time. So they don't have to play by the rules of this planet. We're not from this planet, we're trapped here. So there's you just have all of this inherent power as a spiritual being, and all of that will be available to you once you get all your auditing and are trained, so you know what's going on.
How long does that take?
That's the idea.
How long does the process
forever?
I was gonna say, do you ever really reach the goal?
Have I?
Does anyone often actually reach that state?
Yeah, no, yes and no. So there's the highest level that was released before L. Ron Hubbard, the founder, died, was called OT8. On the bridge, there's up to OT15, I think, but those don't exist. So there are plenty of people who have reached OT8. And then there are people who are trained as high as you can be trained. I don't know how many people have both of those. I do know that there were a few people when I was growing up in the church who had reached OT8, and I never quite understood why these people seemed so normal and had such normal problems. There was this one guy who was pretty unhealthy. I don't remember what it was. I know he smoked. I think there was some big deal with his health. I don't remember details. Probably didn't know details because I was a kid. But he was OT8 and he was poor and he was mean. And I was like, this guy's the ideal. I don't quite get it. But maybe he's just weird. Maybe it's just him. He's an outlier. But yeah, the idea is that you're supposed to be able to just kind of, your body will be optional at that point. You can come and go as you please, and I don't know, fly around being impressive.
So if OT8 is kind of the highest that people reach today and it goes up to 15 somehow, is that therefore, are the next 7 steps therefore basically the dangling carrot? The thing that is kind of hung out there that yeah, you reached OT8, but technically you're still not really good enough. There's because I know for Jehovah's Witnesses, there's always more you could be, or more you could be doing.
Right.
You're never enough. And so I'm just wondering, like, is that kind of a way of instituting the same feeling where, yeah, you've reached OTA and that's pretty cool and all, but there's still these other things that you could do, and we're not even going to tell you what they are.
I'm sure that is part of it. I've never been involved in like the dealing with people at that high of a level, like
Gotcha.
all, yeah, where I worked and what I did was all like much lower level stuff. So I don't really know how that's talked about, but so like the official church line on why L. Ron Hubbard died was that he dropped his body so that he could go research the higher OT levels. So we don't have information yet about what they are, when they'll be released, anything. So I don't know how much that's used as like a selling point. But that being said, there is always something more you can be doing. There's the bridge, and then there's all of these side things that aren't necessarily on that like straight up and down path, but there's like all kinds of side processes that you can buy. And then there's always more training to do. He's like the most prolific author I've maybe ever heard of in my existence.
I think he actually is the most prolific.
Yeah, he's
like science fiction. He wrote a lot of science fiction, before he
yeah,
died.
and completely aside from the science fiction, like the amount of Scientology materials is insane. And it is an aside, but I like went back and read one of like the main documents that's like very important. It's at the beginning of every course. I reread it sometime in the past year, and I was just like, this is gibberish. Like, no wonder people have so much trouble getting through this document. It's garbage. It doesn't say anything. So yeah, he just like spews a bunch of bullshit, and then all of it is gospel. But anyway, so yes, there's always something more you can be doing. But I think even more important than that is there's always more money you could be giving. The donations, I mean, so you don't pay for a service, auditing or training, you donate for a service, and it's all tax deductible. They're all just donations. So there's donations for services, but then there's also donations for other projects and for the International Association of Scientologists, the IAS. I don't even know what the fuck they do, but they're this huge organization within the church that, as far as I can tell, all they do is take money. Yeah, I don't know. That they put on a big event every year, and there's fundraising for them constantly. And I have no, like, they don't publicize what they do with that money. It's just there.
So if it's on a donation basis and there's a course I want to take,
no, you pay the price.
no, wait a minute. This is a donation, so it's
right.
voluntary, and I get to choose what price I pay, right, based on what I can do. There's not. Are you saying there's an official price?
There is an official price, but it's a donation, not a price. But
so
if you don't donate the full suggested donation, then you don't get the service.
It's not much of a suggestion if it's a if it's a cut and dry thing, is it?
Legally, it's a donation.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
It's just funny how things work. So if you don't mind me asking, and we'll get in, obviously we're going to talk about your life story. That's what this is about. But how high did you go, or where did you end your journey?
Yeah, I'm still pretty much at the bottom. I didn't get very far. I did some training, but it was like offshoot training. I was training for a job rather than for going up the bridge. Okay. And I haven't had very much auditing. And most of the auditing that I have had has been in the form of what's called security checks or sec checks, which is confessional. It's just, let's pull out everything you feel bad or awkward about in your entire life and all of your past lives. Yeah.
So would you say then that your story, is it, there are stories that are out there already about Scientology, and oftentimes they're from celebrity viewpoints who've been through it or people who got pretty high up. Would you say that your story is it more kind of the average Scientologist, or, do most make it farther than you? Like, I don't know, I'm trying to just gauge, is your story kind of the common man, so to speak, or woman?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, my story is more common or more, yeah. I've known more people who have stories similar to mine than to, these big names, big celebrities, and, the guys who are at the top who are now out, who have, the resources to tell their story on a national level. Like Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun and I can't remember the other people's names. But yeah,
Lee
there's like those
Remini,
few,
who's done the
yeah,
show and everything.
yeah. So there's like those few big names who you hear everywhere, and like there's, from what I've heard of their stories, I believe it. Like it all fits within the narrative that I've seen, but it's also kind of outside of my experience. I never worked with David Miscavige. I never met him. I didn't work in international management, but very few people did. And I'm not a celebrity, obviously.
Oh,
so
you
I was
will
never
be
like
after this. One
Oh
podcast.
God.
Worldwide celebrity now.
That's exciting. So yeah, I feel like there are probably a lot more people who have had, just kind of like average, everyday person experiences that aren't, as sensational. I mean, I guess there's elements of sensationalism in my story, but it's, yeah. Yes, I would say that my story is more common.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it's like, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we have Ray Franz, who is at the highest level as a governing body member, and he left and he wrote these books, and we all love those books that he wrote. For a lot of us, those were because they were our glimpse into what was going on at the top, and then it helps us to question things. But I like the common person's story. And I actually have people at times who come to me and they're like, well, I want to tell my story on your podcast, but I don't think it's like I wasn't sexually abused by an elder, and I didn't have these things happen to me, and I'm not sure that the story's enough. And my response to that is always, well, but there is like an average person. I wasn't sexually abused by an elder either, right? And I don't think most people were. It happened and it needs to be known, but also just what was the average life of most of us? And there's still this spiritual abuse that's going on, this mental and emotional abuse that underlies most of this stuff. And that's enough, right? Like that's part of your story, and so maybe you had a good time, maybe your childhood was great, and like awesome, like that because that exists too. And I want to tell the kind of more the breadth of the stories a little bit for those who leave. It's okay.
Yeah, that was,
we can't all be at the top,
right. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't. But yeah, that's one of the things one of the reasons I want to do this is because when I was when I was starting to examine my experience and, start to try to figure out what was real and just make sense of what I was feeling and had been through. I couldn't find any stories that sounded a lot like mine. There were elements from these, bigger stories, quote unquote, that that resonated, and like that was helpful, but it would have been really nice to hear from somebody who had been in my position. Yeah, just to know that, I'm not crazy, I'm not alone. And so I'm hoping that somebody out there will hear this who is looking for that. Who's like, yeah, I grew up in Scientology and I never got very far and I wasn't, a big deal, but I still had this experience and it feels weird and wrong and I want to know what's going on. Yeah, you're not alone either.
I love that. And so not only will you help someone like that, but I've known personally ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who woke up after listening or watching the Leah Remini specials on Scientology, and because it was like, oh crap, like that's going on there. It mirrors so much of what I've gone through. Maybe I too am in something that is maybe not quite what I think it is. And it can, cause people to question and to think openly maybe about the mechanisms that have been used against them. And so, so this is definitely going to help, people in a lot of different ways. And I love that you're brave enough to speak out, about your life. So let's get into your personal story a little bit then.
Yeah.
So what was your childhood like at home? Let's say, what was life like for you?
Yeah. So both of my parents were working at the church, like I said. They worked nights and weekends. And then they often I can't remember like exact timelines, obviously, but one or the other or both of them always had another day job too. So I have very few memories of both of my parents in the house at the same time.
I was gonna say, if they're working nights and weekends, somebody's got to work to make ends meet. How do you ever see your family, your parents anyway?
Yeah, by spending a lot of time in the church. So I'm the oldest of four. I have three younger brothers. We were homeschooled with a really big quote unquote around that. I know a lot of JWs on your show talk about their homeschooling experience also. And yeah, we just didn't go to school. We weren't allowed to go outside before 2 p.m. because that's when school got out in our neighborhood. But yeah, my memories of early childhood are pretty jagged, as most people's are. But I remember some periods where like my mom was home during the day, and we would, so when we were like doing school, it was just, whatever, hanging out at the house. I loved to read, so I read a lot. Sometimes she would read with us. Most of my memories of that time are of her like reading to us for a little while in bed and then just falling asleep, and then we would all like sneak off and go play. And then I have some other memories where my dad was around and that was just like straight up playtime. School, it just wasn't really a thing.
So would you say then your relationship with your parents growing up, so it sounds like you mentioned playtime and kind of in both scenarios a little bit. It would be easy for your parents because they're so busy to be really stressed and be really hard on you kids because they were so stressed. Were they, tough and controlling, or, were they just controlling within the confines of like, well, you can't play outside before 2 because people will see, but you know, have a
Right.
good time in the house, you know. I mean, what does that
Yeah,
look
no, so there wasn't any violence or abuse, I would say, in my household. My my dad was just a really kind of quiet, passive type of person, or at least that's how I perceived him in relation to my mom, who is neither quiet nor passive. Um, she could be kind of volatile, like she would get angry about things really easily, but she never, she would yell. That's about it. Which is fine as things go. It's fine. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of structure or control, really. I'm there's so like I feel like the way things would go is like it would be fine. Like we just do whatever we wanted for a while, and then all of a sudden one day there would be like crackdown. Like we're gonna get serious. We're gonna do this. Take all those pictures of pop bands off your walls. That's unprofessional. This is not okay. We've been slacking off too much. You need to work on your lesson books. And like it would be like that for like a day or two. And we'd be like, okay, we'll work on our lesson books. And then nobody kept it up. There was no follow through. And it would just go back to like whatever, doing whatever, hanging out, being kids. But then we also spent a lot of time in the church, and I started studying my first courses there when I was 7. And so then that was, I think it was like 3 hours a day that I would do that. I don't really remember exact timing. But so I got really into studying, and I loved being the youngest person there. And when so I would just like go in with my parents when they went into work, and then like I'd do my little study period, and then I would just like hang around in the church.
You're saying church, and your
Mhm.
parents are going to work in the church. Like, are
Yeah.
there lots of individual Scientology churches around the United States, and you all were in wherever? I don't know where you were living at the time, but so was there just like a local community Scientology church?
Yes.
And when they went in there to work, I mean, are they like cleaning the church, or
Yeah.
is that handing
No.
out
Well,
leaflets, or
okay. So I guess some information about the structure of the organization. So there are city churches in like every, I don't know, a lot of major cities around the world. And then, so those are called organizations. So, so yeah, my parents worked at the org. And then there's above that, there's like a management level that's like, there's like East US and West US and Europe and Asia and whatever. So there's like continental management organizations. There's international management. And then there's also higher level. So the city churches, the city orgs can only go up to a certain level of auditing and training. So then there's higher level churches, and there's only a few of those that do the higher levels. So there's like the big one in Florida, the Flag Service Organization. And then there's like some in LA. There's one in England. I guess there's probably one in Australia. So that's like the general structure. And then each church or each like individual organization has an organizational structure that's the same in each one. It's called it's a, an L. Ron Hubbard trademarked system for running an organization. So there's an org board, which lays out all of the divisions and departments and jobs within each of those sections. So there's like the public division, which deals with, you know, getting new people in and the introductory courses and stuff. And then there's the treasury division, which deals with all of the money throughout the organization. And then there's the technical division, which handles the training and auditing. And like each of those are a department within that division. And so there's like jobs or posts within each of these departments. So there's like the head of the department or the head of the division, then there's the head of the department, and then there's sections. So there's like different course rooms for different types of training. So there's people in charge of each of those course rooms, and then there's like jobs within each of those course rooms. Like there's the person who handles all of the paperwork and the admin, they're called the course admin. And then there's the supervisor who is like in charge overall of that course room and making sure that like people are getting through their courses. And then there's a word clearer whose job is to like make sure people understand all the words and everything they're reading. And like there's all these—
A word clearer?
Yeah, there's like all these techniques for finding and clearing up words that you don't understand, because that's a really big thing in Scientology.
Yeah, I knew that. Well, because
yeah.
when you can control people's language, you can control people's thoughts and
Yeah.
well, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
To
So
words. We did the same thing, just in not nearly as extensive as Scientology, but there we had our own language too in ways. So
yeah. So
so is it really so busy? Like, is it? I'm just trying to think like, is the local city org so busy that your parents can be there just like little busybodies for hours every night? Like, is there that much work?
They made it happen. They certainly did that much work. Yeah, I remember it being fairly busy. I would say there's maybe like, I don't have any exact numbers, but I think there were somewhere between 20 and 30 people working at the church when I was a kid. And there were probably a couple hundred people, Scientologists who are not on staff are called public. So there were probably a few hundred public who were in and out. When you're doing training, you're supposed to be like on a daily schedule. So there's like different time slots, and you sign up, and you're supposed to like stick to that every day. So I remember there being a lot of people coming in and out every day. But then there's also like, you know, a lot of outreach, and there's quotas that have to be met for that. And then like the management organizations are always like on top of people for getting more money in and sending more letters out, getting more people in off the street, selling more books, getting more donations. And then like there are these big events that the church holds every few months. And so they had to do event call-in. So there's a lot of like calling every person who's ever had anything to do with the church and like getting them to commit to coming to an event, or commit to donating a certain amount of money, or commit to this or that. So there's always, even if there weren't like people there who you needed to be like actively servicing, there was always other stuff to be worked on.
Yeah, that's intense.
And then of course there's like a huge backlog of filing, and there was always cleaning to be done. And so they were always super busy, and there were always times when like they had to stay later or come in earlier to like do an all hands on deck project of some kind. And then they were also supposed to be doing their own studying. So yeah, they were very busy with the church. And I know that it was always viewed as like the top priority. Like Scientology was always the top priority. And I knew that and accepted that as a kid. My mom, when I was pretty young, I think my middle brother had just been born, so I was probably like 4. My mom went to LA to do some training, like higher level training for a few months. So mostly I remember like that Christmas was just like the saddest Christmas. It was just like me and my brothers and my dad, and like we lived in this like apartment, this kind of shitty apartment, but there was like this little slot between the sink and the wall. And my dad, I just remember my dad like pulling out our 3 little presents from behind this slot in the sink, and my mom wasn't there, and it was just like, it sucked, but it was also just like, it was important. She was getting trained, and that was what mattered. And so we would just deal with it. Yeah.
So what did you do in the evenings when your parents are busy off doing their own things? Obviously, you said you had your own work to do, like let's just say a couple hours a day as you were doing your own training, but did you and you said you were the oldest of 4?
Yeah.
Oldest of 4. So like, did you all just live life? Did you watch TV? Did you just hang out, play games?
So there was this other family whose parents also worked at the church, and they had 4 kids also. So it was same ages and genders. So the oldest girl and then 3 boys, and we were all the same ages. So we shared a nanny through most of my childhood. And the nanny was always like another Scientologist. And there were different ones throughout the years. So they would get dropped off in the evenings or like at the beginning of the day on the weekend. And so we would play with them with a nanny. We weren't allowed to watch TV as kids. We could watch movies, but not TV. So yeah, I guess it was when I was 7, I started doing my own training, taking courses at the church. So at that point, it kind of shifted to being more church focused. But before that, and when I wasn't doing that, it was just like hanging out with the other kids and playing. They always came to our house, I think, because we were closer to the church and my parents didn't drive. So they would get dropped off and would just hang out there. And then at like 11 or midnight or something, all the parents would come home and we would already be asleep, obviously. Yeah. When I was at the church though, I would do my like few hours of study, and then I would just like wander around the building asking people like, how can I help? What can I do? And people would just like give me little jobs, like go dust the baseboards, or like, here's a stack of things to put away, report back when you're done. So like report back for duty, ready for my next job. And I took a lot of pride in being the good kid. And there were often other kids around the church who like were in this similar position. But I always felt like I was the best of them, because like they didn't care about studying. Like a lot of them went to public school and they did watch TV. And so I felt like they were more, I guess in your terms, like worldly, like they were more, less on purpose is how we would say it. So I was like dedicated, and I was like focused on the purpose, the clearing of the planet. I was this like little 7-year-old in my stupid frilly dress. And so I always felt like an outsider with my peers, but accepted and like admired by adults. And that was more important to me than like fitting in with the other kids.
Well, you are the oldest, and the oldest is often the people pleaser of the family.
Yeah.
Not that I know anything about that, and you do feel like you're made to feel like the more responsible one. You're often responsible for your younger siblings at times, and you want to prove your worth. And
Hmm.
you know, you can just see how, just by being at the church setting, and doing your work, and then having all this extra time and going around finding things to do, it just kind of trains that workaholic nature a little bit, of always being busy and productive. And
Hmm.
um, that's really interesting. Because so then you were at the church then most nights, or how often did you go?
I don't remember how often. I remember it being a lot. I don't know if it was most nights, but at least a few nights a week.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, and I think another important thing for like how life was at home is that my mom, or Scientology in general, views all people as spiritual beings, and we just have these bodies. So age is not a thing. We've lived millions of lifetimes, so we've done it all. We've had all these experiences. We have all this knowledge. So kids are not kids. Kids are just fully grown, capable spiritual beings who are in small bodies. Um, it's like it's phrased like you're just an adult in a small body. And that was very much my mom's viewpoint and attitude towards us. So um, it was like, if you can reach the stove, you can cook for yourself. Um, we didn't have like family meals. I mean, part of that was just timing, but like, I grew up, my brothers and I grew up just like cooking for ourselves, and we were supposed to clean up. We didn't always, but like, cleaning was like our responsibility. Like our mom would do dishes for us, or um, clean our rooms, or do our laundry, or we were capable beings, so we were expected to do these things. And it uh and as the oldest, like you were saying, I was kind of in charge of making sure that happened, um with varying degrees of effectiveness. I think I probably also had some of that like volatile, like, oh, I don't care, whatever, it's fine, and then like, okay, we're gonna do this, and like crack down. um I'm sure I like inflicted that on my brothers as well. um but yeah, so that was just kind of like the attitude at home. And then you mentioned like workaholic and productivity was also like a huge important thing. Scientology is about statistics. And so every job or position you find yourself in has a statistic, and your goal should always be to be making that higher. So, if you're, our statistic for schooling was like abilities regained, meaning like we already had these abilities from past lives, so we had to like regain them. So if we like learned how to spell a new word, that was like one ability regained. So like at various times, things like that would be tracked, or like uh, Day's room is kept clean. Uh, Things like that were like tracked as part of our productivity. So that mindset was like really deeply ingrained. And I'm still like, I'm 34 and I still like have this obsession with tracking things.
Well, of course you do. My goodness.
And like some of it's useful sometimes. So I'm like, this is healthy and great. And other people are like, are you sure? Do you need
Well,
to be
yeah,
tracking every ounce of water you drink?
the problem with it is measuring your value as a human being against a number.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but obviously, yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses love their statistics as well, and um, often the workaholic nature, always trying to do more, be better, place more magazines, or go out and service more hours and talk to more people and all that stuff. But this kind of, Scientology, what you're talking about here, is taking that up a level as far as the tracking goes. And so I had heard in the past, I don't know, on some other podcast or show or something, about how, I guess, if the children are, if their parents are in the Sea Org, then basically the Sea Org raises the children. The parents are off doing work. The children basically go off with, I don't know, other people. And I'd heard that about children kind of being seen as little adults. And I just thought about, what pressure that must put on kids to not be kids at times. And how, you're essentially being raised by an organization.
Yeah.
And honestly, it sounds like you all weren't in the Sea Org, but still, the way you're being raised is all dictated by the organization. And the same thing is really true for us as Jehovah's Witnesses. If Watchtower told our parents how to raise us and what was important, and that all trickled down to us and how we were raised. So you're not really, you're raised by your parents, but your parents are often so involved in this other thing, and it colors their view of the world and everything, and then it gets passed down to us, and that's just how we're raised. So there's like part of your mom and dad's own little personality in there, and then also, they're being dominated by this much larger structure.
Yeah, completely. I find it hard even now to separate like what aspects of like the attitude towards the world was just like from my mom, and what was the church, or what's Scientology and what's just my mom's personality. Yeah, I find it really hard to separate. Yeah, and on those same lines, like discipline was dealt with like purely in church terms. Like, so as ethics is also another like really big part of the church, and we'll definitely get into that. But like, so there's all these like procedures that are like outlined for how to deal with out ethics behavior. So like unethical behavior. Out ethics is just like a word to mean that like something isn't being done right. So out ethics, or like out I don't know, I can't think of another one right now, but like it's just tacked onto things to mean like done wrong. So like if we, for example, I like stole a bunch of my mom's rings once when I was a little kid, and I hid them in this bottle, and then I like made the mistake of showing a babysitter, but telling her like, oh, I found these in the backyard. And of course she was like, okay, bullshit. So she told my mom, and then I like got in trouble, but rather than like getting a spanking or whatever, getting put in timeout or grounded or whatever, I had to go do ethics conditions at the church. So there's like all these steps I had to take where like we determined that there's like levels that are laid out, so like treason or liability or enemy. So we had to like determine which of these states I was in by taking this action, and then like work on steps to move up to the next level. And like I had to do an amends project, and I had to like think about whether I wanted to be part of the team that was helping my mom or hurting my mom by taking her stuff. And like, so it was all like, all of the discipline was like regulated by the church practices in that way.
So whereas we as Jehovah's Witnesses, if we had done something like that, we might be sat down by our parents and have to have some awful biblical discussion where they thumped us over the head with the Bible, basically by, making it, shaming us with scripture for what we had done. Oftentimes, those conversations, it's like, man, I wish I had never done anything so I don't have to have these conversations, because it's awful. You had to go into, I mean, would it be fair to say, was it hours and hours of training around this one incident? to figure out where you had gone wrong, and then to correct the behavior, and then make, I guess, amends. And
Yeah,
I mean, when you think about it, there are some healthy things in there. I mean, like making amends, that
for
can be
sure.
a kind and healthy thing, but it's just so extreme to
Yeah,
one thing a kid did, but you're seen as an adult,
yeah.
so there,
So yeah, you can understand these
no
concepts
allowance.
and yeah,
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
oftentimes the humanity is stripped in these groups from situations, and people aren't seen as human beings that sometimes are going to err. They're more like objects to control. And how do we control this object? Well, we subject it to all these mechanisms in order to bring it back into alignment.
yeah. And like individuality is not acceptable. So yeah, like sometimes it wasn't even like something that I had specifically done wrong, but it was just like not, behavior that wasn't in line with how I was supposed to be, or like, you're spending too much time in your room alone. So that means that you're individuating, you're separating yourself from the group, which is the family unit, which means that you've done something wrong to the family. So you have these like secret, they're called overts and withholds. So overts are like transgressions, like something bad you did, and a withhold is something bad you did that you're hiding. So there, it's shortened to OWs. So like you have OWs, so you need to do an, because so like I'm a kid, I want to go hang out in my room and read a book. But if I do that too much, then I have OWs because I'm individuating. So then I would have to do like an OW write up, which is where like I sit down with a stack of paper and a pencil and I write down in this like very specific time, place, form, and event, like everything I can think of that I might have done to transgress against my family. And then that has to be like read and approved by somebody, either like an ethics officer in the church, or if it's just at home, then my mom. Until I feel like I've gotten everything down, like put everything down that I need to, and I feel some sense of relief. And then we can work on handling all of those transgressions that I just confessed to. And if there's anything that needs to be addressed in terms of, paying somebody back, or, making amends, or apologizing, or whatever it is, like all of those things need to be addressed in a practical way. And like you said, like there's some value in that. There is like a little kernel of like truth or goodness in there, but then it's just corrupted by this, like everything is treated the same. Like if I had a bad thought about my mom, that's the same as if I like kicked my brother in the teeth and stole his computer. Like those are equivalent.
Might as well get a computer.
Right? Yeah. And also just like normal kid behavior, or like normal human behavior.
And can I ask, are the rules? So how do you know when you're spending too much time individuating in your room? Like, is there a time limit, or is this completely subjective?
It's totally arbitrary. Yeah. And it certainly wouldn't be me being like, I'm spending too much time in my room. I mean, maybe at some point, like it might get internalized enough that it would get to that point. But as a kid, I'm like lost in a book. That's like what I love to do.
So the point,
but
though,
then like
you can get in trouble at any time. So basically, Laurel, I mean, couldn't you have gotten in trouble for something at any moment in your life for something completely arbitrary?
Yes.
And then you have to not only own up to that, which you didn't even see coming, but you have to own up to all of the transgressions that you may have had. And I assume there's a lot of pressure to have transgressions. So do you eventually end up creating transgressions because like, well, I've got to have other things, right? Like this can't be all that's wrong with me. There must be more. So I start writing down all these other things as well. Whether they're really real or not, because it's all arbitrary.
Right. Not so much like making things up that I didn't actually do, but there is like, oh, well, I you know, had an extra bite of ice cream and I was only supposed to have this much. So like maybe that counts. Or like I read this book and it had this word that I didn't understand, but I like thought maybe I understood it. So I went by it. So I went by a misunderstood word. So that counts.
That's what I meant. Because
Yeah.
that is not, I didn't mean necessarily just creating something out of thin
Yeah.
air, but you're trying to find things.
Hmm.
Um, Getting back to that feeling of never being good enough, you're literally looking for things about you that might not be good enough so that you can write them on this form, and so that then you can be cleared. I don't know if that's really the
Yeah.
right word, but by confessing your transgressions and working the process, then you can feel that relief on the other side. But it's just,
Yeah. And then you can be like part of the group again,
yeah,
without, yeah, having that individuation.
well, yeah, yeah. We can't have you having your own identity. Your identity
No.
is linked to an organization and a bunch of made up arbitrary things, not who you are or what you feel would be okay. I guess I just, that has to be that's I'm taken aback by how psychologically damaging that would have to be. How much, because I am a coach. In my coaching practice, I work with people who are dealing with the ramifications and the results of growing up in certain ways, and that's just very extreme to have to constantly be looking for things, that trying not to get in trouble by doing anything that anyone could perceive as something that could get you in trouble, and then when you do, now I have to look for more things to be in trouble about. That's
Yeah.
exhausting. That's really
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah, it is. um, and it definitely led to feeling like I was always living this kind of double life, which I know a lot of people in cults feel like they have. And like it wasn't anything extreme, but like I felt like there was me, who I really was, and then was who I was supposed to be, who I pretended to be, who I like, you know, there were elements that definitely overlapped. But like, you know, I felt like I had to be careful about that divide. And like there were certain, or like not even certain things, but just like generally I never felt safe just being open and comfortable and like talking to my mom about whatever. Or like I just always felt like I had to be careful about what I said and what I thought. Like I remember this so distinctly. We were cleaning the kitchen once and my mom was in a really bad mood, and I was scrubbing the stove and I was like, man, I wish we had a maid. And she like blew up at me and was like, well, if you want to fucking pay for a maid. And like, okay, I get it. She's like, we were super poor and she was stressed out and she was exhausted and, you know, everything was a mess. And it's, yeah, maybe like, of course we couldn't afford a maid, like, obviously. But I remember feeling like, oh shit, I slipped up. Like, I'm 7 or 8 or whatever. And like, whoops, I said a real thought. Shouldn't have said that. This is what happens when you say what you're thinking without, you know, considering it first.
It's not safe to be yourself, which
Yeah.
always gets back to the thing that I always say, the double life. We're always taught to think that the true self is the double life, when in reality, the true self, that's us. And
Yeah.
it's the life that's being dictated by a group or an organization. That's often the life, that's the double life. That's the secondary life that we're being forced to live. But it's flipped on its side so that they can make us feel like our life with them is the real life, and
Right.
our internal monologue and our feelings and our authentic self, well, that's the double life. That's the one we need to get rid of.
Yeah.
And you were just saying, I wish we had a maid. That doesn't, like, you can see that brought up probably some shame in your mom that you didn't have the money to do something like that. And so therefore she reacted so strongly instead of just, okay, yeah, it would be nice to have a
Like, that's
maid,
a
wouldn't
kid
it?
thing to
Right?
say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be sweet. Let's dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's another thing in Scientology called HE&R, which is human emotion and reaction, which is a bad thing. So it's when you react with emotion. Yeah, it is what it sounds like, but it's a bad thing.
Is it
Yeah.
her because women are emotional?
Oh, no, it's
Okay.
HE&R. That's how it said, HE&R.
Oh, okay. So it's actually said that way. I was just wondering if this was like some misogynistic
Oh, no.
Thing. Okay. Because it could easily,
No.
okay.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, I was like, that's awful
Hysterics.
if that's what
No.
that is.
No, it's awful on its own without
Okay.
being sexist.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
it's
its
just
own
being a
brand of
human
awful.
is a bad thing because we're supposed to be above that. I think actually, I just remembered this. It's like Homo sapiens is humans as we are, and we're supposed to be Homo novus, just like new human or whatever. That's like L. Ron Hubbard's term for it. So we're supposed to be better than human. And like Scientology is supposed to bring us up to this state that is superior to humanity. So if you're like just upset about something, or you're grumbling, or you're in a grumpy mood or whatever, somebody in the church, or as a kid, it would be my mom, would be like, knock off the HE&R. It's like, you're just not allowed to have human emotions, but only sometimes. Like sometimes, whatever, it doesn't. And if it's a superior person having human emotions and reactions, then you can't say anything to them. But in arbitrary moments where somebody's like not feeling it, then you're a bad person who's having HE&R and you need to knock it off.
Wow, that's kind of next level as far as psychologically trying to breed out of you your own feelings, your own emotions. That's really that's tough. That's actively trying to distance yourself from just your own feelings about things. And we all have, like, every human has bad days. You were talking earlier about your OT8 buddy there who, wasn't a super nice guy and had his own issues, but because I guess he's OT8, you can't say anything to him about it, right? Because he's more superhuman almost than anyone else based on his level.
Yeah.
Wow. So did you ever have, I guess, how did this progress as you went into your teenage years and young adulthood? So in other words, as you start getting older, I guess first of all, something that's just jumping into my mind, usually when I'm talking to Jehovah's Witnesses about that, somewhere in your teenage years, there's the moment where you get baptized and you're officially a Jehovah's Witness. And a lot of religions have some sort of official baptism or service or ceremony or whatever that it's like, all right, now you're one of us. Is there something that you're working toward doing that specifically makes you a Scientologist, like that cements that? Or is it just the fact that you're taking courses your whole life, you just are a Scientologist, or you are working up the bridge to hopefully become a Thetan at some point?
Yeah. There isn't like a baptism of any kind. But I remember, I've actually forgotten about until just now, so that's cool. There's the International Association of Scientologists, which I mentioned earlier, has like different levels of donations. And I think there is like an official membership in the Association of Scientologists. So there's like there's an annual membership and then a lifetime membership, and then you get into like patron of the arts and like all these like higher level like big donations, and they're just like totally arbitrary. Like, here's a title that you now have because you gave us money, and like that's all it means. But I do remember getting my lifetime membership, and so I don't know, it was probably like $40 or something, I don't remember, but like somehow I got that money, and I like decided that that's what I was going to do. I was going to get my lifetime IAS membership card. And so that was like a big deal. And again, like it was like all this adult praise around that, and it was like announced to everybody, and everybody clapped for me, and it was like this like moment of like big pride. But it wasn't, I already was a Scientologist, and so it didn't mean anything.
Right, but that is very baptism-y, as far as what I would compare it to with Jehovah's Witnesses, the adult praise that comes along with it. You're announced. It's like you're official. We were already assumed that we were going to be Jehovah's Witnesses growing up in that environment, but baptism kind of cemented that. And I can see this lifetime. When you say lifetime, does this but your life is this one continuous thing, right?
Well, so it's just a donation tier. Like it doesn't mean anything temporally. Like there's an annual membership, which it lasts 1 year, and then it's just like, a lifetime subscription. So you just get a card that says lifetime, and then you don't have to pay the fee every year, but you are still expected to keep paying to get to higher levels, which also don't mean anything. They're just titles. You just get a card or like a trophy or something.
It's interesting that it centers around money donations.
Oh yeah. So that was another thing that was like a big deal, was that like I, as a young child, was willing to like part with this money to give it to the organization, because I understood at that young age that like this was more important than me like spending this on candy or toys or whatever. So that was it was a big deal.
No, I can see why
even though it didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But then there was also, so when I was about 12, I did start going to school for about 1.5 years. And so there's a school that's affiliated with the church called Delphi Academy. And they pretend they're not affiliated, but everybody who works there is a Scientologist, and they use L. Ron Hubbard's study technology, which is like the misunderstood words thing, and like the structure of the courses like aligns with the Scientology structure of studying. But like kids who aren't Scientologists so can go to the school. So my parents got divorced when I was about 10. And there was some, home disruption around that also. Obviously, like my dad moved from the bedroom into like the family room, and was like sleeping in the family room for a few months. And I remember so clearly writing in my diary at that time, I was like 8 or 9. Today it's separate bedrooms, tomorrow it could be separate apartments. And then he did move out eventually. And I was definitely like a daddy's girl. I've noticed as I'm talking through this, like whenever I'm talking about the church and Scientology and like the policies and the procedures, I always say like my mom did this, my mom said this. my dad was just kind of like, to me, he was just like this quiet, chill guy who's like into art, and he like he did illustrations, and he liked music, and he was kind of funny, just like this quiet, chill guy, and we like got along really well. And like my brothers would always tease me that like I was his favorite, and I'd be like, no, but like, yeah, I know. I know.
No, no, no.
Yeah, exactly. So that him moving out was really tough on me. But you know, I knew I wasn't supposed to show any HENR about it, so I tried hard not to. And you know, I also knew that my mom needed me to hold it together because I needed to help her with the boys, and especially now that my dad wasn't there, like I needed to be extra helpful. And there just wasn't room or time or space for me to like have feelings about it, really. So yeah, I just kind of like tried not to think about it. And my dad would come hang out with us on Sundays. No, he was still working at the church at that time. So I don't remember. We saw him weekly, but I don't remember the details.
So is divorce not is divorce a big deal inside Scientology? I mean,
No, it's totally allowed.
I would think
I
divorce
mean, there,
itself would be HENR on some level, you know.
yeah, I mean, it is, but again, there's like that arbitrary, like who's talking to you, who are you dealing with, who decides it's a problem. It just really depends.
Okay.
Um,
So then you all were still allowed to, so you all could still be around each other.
yeah, so at that time he was still working for the church. And I think my mom wasn't at that point. And a lot of this is like behind the scenes for me as a kid. Like I didn't know what was going on, but my mom since has told me that like there was a lot of drama within the church when they were getting divorced, and like somebody was like threatening to like have her declared a suppressive person, which is like the official like title of you are an evil apostate trying to damage the church, and that's when you have to disconnect or, you know, be shunned by everyone. And so it's called getting declared. So yeah, I guess there was like a lot of drama about their divorce, or like around their divorce, that I just didn't know about. So I can't really speak to it. But so my mom was not working at the church at that point. My dad still was. My mom started seeing this other guy who's now my stepdad pretty shortly thereafter. They had been friends for a while. And he was great. Like he's a great guy. So it, you know, it was like the pain of like the separation, or my dad not being around, was kind of like alleviated by like this new exciting person who was also very much like, I'm not trying to be your dad, but like, you know, I'm here. And he liked hanging out with kids, and he was fun, so we all liked him. So it's just kind of like this, everything's kind of changing. And then we moved out of the apartment that I had grown up in, and my mom and stepdad bought a house just like on the other side of town. So we were living in this house. And then at that point, I started going to this Scientology school, which is how I started all of this. So for about a year and a half, I went to the Scientology school, but it was like out in the suburbs. So I had to like walk a mile to the train station and then take a train 45 minutes and then take a trolley 15 minutes and then walk to a teacher's house, and that teacher would drive me to school. So I like had to leave home at like 5:30 in the morning to get to school by 8, and then I'd get home at like 7:30 at night. And I hated school. It was not because of the school, like, or the school itself, but like the social aspect was just like way over my head. I was an introvert, and I was awkward, and like, all of my life I had been groomed to like please adults and not be one of the kids and like be better than the other kids. So then like going into the situation where it was like mixed Scientology and not Scientology kids, but it was an environment that we weren't supposed to talk about Scientology. It was like supposed to be separate, because there were non-Scientology kids there. And just like all of these people had been in school and around kids their whole lives, and I was just like a total fucking outsider. I like did not know how to assimilate. And I remember at one point I wrote this letter to all of my classmates because I felt like I didn't have any friends. So I like wrote this letter being like, I want to be your friend, and I don't remember what I said, but I was basically just like, I want to be your friend, and so like if you want to be friends, let's talk. But I brought it to my teacher to make photocopies, and she read it and then sent me to like the school counselor person, who is also the mother of like the popular girl in my class. And she read it and like had this talk with me, or like lecture at me about how like I didn't need to be friends with everybody, and like look at my daughter, she knows she doesn't need to be friends with everybody, and like doesn't need everybody to like her. And I remember sitting there and just being like, okay, I'm not gonna try to be friends with anybody. Like, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. I don't get it. So I'm gonna stop. And I was like super embarrassed. But also I guess I'm glad that they didn't let me put that letter in everybody's locker, because that probably would have been super embarrassing too.
It sounds like you might have had a whole bunch of mothers kind of being an asshole to you. I mean, my goodness, like you just wanted to have a friend, some friends. You weren't trying to run for class president and be everybody's best friend.
Yeah.
My goodness, that's quite an overreaction.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that was just kind of a weird year. And then the next, so that was like one full school year, and the next school year, I started, and I was like, I turned 13 that year, and I was like starting to like, get a little more confidence, and like I knew some of the kids, and one of my friends from the church started going that year also, so I had like a friend in the class with me, so that made it a bit easier. But then also that year I decided to join the Sea Org. And I actually cannot remember any of the circumstances surrounding like how that came to be. I've been like digging through my memory trying to dig this up, and I don't know how this happened. But I ended up getting recruited for the Sea Org, which, so for anybody who doesn't know, the local churches, the city churches, are staffed by just like regular people who have lives outside of the church. They can have families, whatever. They're just like normal people who work, either day shifts or night and weekend shifts. And then the management organizations and the higher level organizations are all staffed by Sea Org members who sign a billion-year contract, and give up any outside life and live on compounds in dorms. They get paid $50 a week, plus the room and board. They're not allowed to have any like outside life, basically. Like they work full, like it's something, I mean, the schedules vary and maybe they're different now, I don't know. But when I was there, it was like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Is your work day. And then you just, lights out is by 11.
5 days a week?
And that's your whole 7 days a week.
7 days a week. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's your whole life. And you're not allowed to have kids. You can get married, but you're not allowed to have kids. There's no premarital sex or anything actually at all. So like dating isn't really a thing. You just get married.
Are there Sea Orgs? Is there a Sea Org that you go to, learn whatever you got to learn, and then you are sent out as a staffer to these other places? Or
the Sea Org is an umbrella organization. So you join the Sea Org, and then there are Sea Org bases throughout the world. So like the one in Florida is the flag base, and then like the management organizations like East US and West US each have like buildings or campuses that are that organization. So you join the Sea Org and you are recruited by somebody from a specific organization, like base, and so you start there, like wherever you're recruited is where you start. And then, but like once you're in the Sea Org, they can send you anywhere. You get assigned a post, and you go where you're told and you do what you're told to do. So you can join in Florida and end up in Australia. Like it's, yeah, they just send you wherever they want. So I think it was like in the 80s or 90s, they decided that you couldn't have kids when you were in the Sea Org anymore, because it was just too complicated. And like you were saying earlier, like these kids were being raised by an organization and not by the family. But the real thing is like the explanation was just like, it's a distraction. Like you're here to work and kids are a distraction. And if you're thinking about your kid when you're on post, then you're not giving everything to the church. So, but you can join if you have kids, you can join, and then they're like, they just come with you, and then they're by default part of it. And then you can join on your own as young as 13.
Thus you.
Thus me. So right after I turned 13, I joined the Sea Org, and I went to New York City, which is the East US management office, because whoever recruited me, that's where they were from. So I left school, said bye to all my friends, packed up a suitcase and a backpack, and my mom got on a bus with me to New York City. And I guess I had a guardian there, like the legal guardian was signed over, but I don't remember them, or like they weren't like part of my life. And then I worked there for like 3 months. I don't have a lot of memories of it. So when you first join the Sea Org, there's like a sort of boot camp where you study. There's like 5 courses that you have to study to like sort of introduce you to like how the Sea Org operates and like the mental attitude you're supposed to have and maintain. So you study for a certain number of hours a day, and then the rest of the day you spend doing like manual labor. So yeah, I did that, got through that. like our initial, it's called the Estates Project Force, or the EPF. Got through that in a few weeks, and then was just like working in an office, like doing random office stuff.
How
Like
does it
that.
feel at 13 years old to leave your 3 siblings behind, to leave your life behind on this bus trip to a place I don't know if you've ever been to or not, but just
Not
this
really.
new place and into this new life at 13? How does it feel? Were you excited? Were you scared? A mix of both? Were you just dreading the whole thing? Like, how did you
No,
feel?
I was into it. Another thing my mom said over and over growing up was, I'm raising you to be Sea Org members. And the idea is that like we were going, so the Sea Org is like billed as like the most ethical people on the planet, like the most dedicated people, the cream of the crop. Many are called, few are chosen, like all of these like inspirational slogans to make it seem like this really important calling. And like their motto is, we come back. So like lifetime after lifetime, thus the billion-year contract. So, and I knew, like I signed my first Sea Org contract actually when I was like 8 or 9, but I was too young to actually go. So it wasn't binding, you know, nobody
It was
could
a
do anything
practice
about it.
contract.
Yeah, I signed a few of those. But you know, it was again like, you know, announced and everybody cheered, and it was like this big deal of like, look how dedicated and on purpose Laurel is. So it was, you know, kind of, it was just the natural order of things. Like that's what was going to happen. Of course I was going to join the Sea Org. So I didn't have much of a life outside of it because, you know, I was going to this school that I was gone for, what is that, like 14 hours a day or something. And I don't know, I'm sure I was nervous. Again, I don't remember like a lot of how I felt about it, or a lot of like what was going on.
You
I'm
were
sure
kind
I
of
was
fulfilling your
nervous and
destiny.
scared. Yeah, it was just like, this is, of course this is gonna be what I do. So, and also there were a lot of other young people there. Like I was definitely not the only 13-year-old there. There was this other girl also named Laurel, who was my age, who I guess was a friend, like the daughter of a friend of my mom's or something, or I think she was my stepdad's friend's daughter or something. I don't know. Somehow there was some connection. So we became friends. And yeah, I don't know. There was like, it wasn't fun. But I was pretty convinced, like, I don't know, it wasn't even really something I thought about. It just, I knew I was doing the right thing. And so like being there, like, yeah, sure, it sucked and was long hours, and I got yelled at for being 30 seconds late, and I couldn't, you know, walk to the store alone and whatever. But it was just like, okay, this is just what it is. It's how it is. It's how it's supposed to be. I'm doing the best thing I could possibly be doing, and I'm helping save the planet. So that's all that matters.
You can do a lot in life if you believe you're doing it for the right reason. You're doing the right thing.
Yep.
If you would have asked me as a young Jehovah's Witness, why are you pioneering? Why are you going to be a ministerial servant or whatever? What was the right thing to do? That's what I would always say. It wasn't out of some grand love for Jehovah, God, or whatever, but it was like, this is the right thing to do. I've been told my whole life that this is what's right. And I mean, we want to be right.
Yeah.
So I'm doing the thing that's right. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's just this natural progression. It wasn't some big emotional deal. It was just, but these are the steps you take. And so I did the things I was expected to do. This sounds
Yeah.
like it's kind of what the path you were on.
Yeah. So that actually didn't last very long. I left in January of the year 2000, for like left home for New York. And then in March, I was sent home, very abruptly. I had been getting a sec check, a security check, which is, I mentioned it earlier, but it's like a confessional procedure. Again, it's like the overts and withholds write up, but it's done with another person rather than me just like sitting there writing. Somebody's like asking me questions and I have to like say it all out loud instead of writing it down. And it's also done on an e-meter, which is this device. I actually got one on eBay a while ago, just to have it around, but I don't know where I put it, so I can't show you. But yeah, so you hold these cans and it's connected to this meter, and there's a little needle that moves around, and the various movements mean different things. So like if your needle's like kind of twitchy like that, it's called a dirty needle, which means that you're hiding something. So there's like this whole procedure for like digging out whatever you're hiding. So whenever they see that needle movement, they're like, what's that? What's that right there? What's that? What are you thinking? What's that right there? Until you finally like come out with it. So anyway, I had been doing this confessional or sec check, and like as soon as we were done with it, basically they were like, okay, we've decided you're not qualified for this York. Bye. You're getting on a bus in an hour. Go pack your stuff. And to this day, I don't really know what happened or why that decision was made or who made it. But yeah, so it's just like everything's fine. And then I was called into an office. Somebody I didn't know told me to go pack my shit.
Again, an arbitrary decision that affects your life. And again, you're being put under the firing squad, so to speak. I mean, I can only imagine when there's a dirty needle and it's, vibrating, and they say that right there. Like, even if there isn't something, you're going to have to come up with something, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So like so when you leave the Sea Org, you're not kicked out of the church, or you don't have to leave Scientology as a whole, but you are considered like a traitor to the church, basically. So you have to get, even if you didn't make the choice yourself, it still counts. So they give you a program, like an ethics program to, so you're supposed to like study whatever documents they tell you to study in order to figure out, what you did wrong and how to be better. And then you have to, again, do those conditions that I was talking about earlier, where you like, decide which group to be part of. And, there's like all very specific steps that you have to follow to work your way up through the conditions. So I had to do all of that where I could like be considered part of the group of like good Scientologists, or, in good standing with the church again. So at 13, I had only been gone for 3 months. I came back home, and my mom had, she had started her own business. She was like doing bookkeeping. She wasn't working for the church at that point, but still very much a dedicated Scientologist. My dad, right around that time, left the church. So he didn't like make a big stink about it, but he stopped working at the church and then just kind of like faded away. And just kind of didn't want to have anything to do with it, but he didn't like come out and say like, I'm opposed to Scientology or anything. So he wasn't declared. We weren't, we didn't have to like choose between him and Scientology or anything. He just kind of like faded off into the background, and it wasn't a huge deal, but it was also like, like there was something wrong with it, and like it would come up every now and then as like, what's your dad doing these days? Has he said anything bad to you? So it was like something that we always had to like be on guard for. Like, is he turning apostate? Or like, I mean, that's not the phrasing that we used, but like that was the idea. So it just like put this strain on our relationship.
So you were
And
basically being
then,
told not to trust, to be distrustful of him.
yeah, because he like wasn't involved in the church anymore, and because he had left staff, that meant that, you know, he was probably out ethics, even if he wasn't necessarily a suppressive person. So like, you know, just wasn't a, I think you guys call it a bad association.
Yeah, it sounds like he was basically put on reproof. Like he wasn't disfellowshipped and shunned. He was just a person that had probably done something wrong, but was sorry for it and had to be. Well, actually, I would say in his case, because he hadn't even done anything like that, so maybe he'd be just marked as bad association. That might
Yeah.
be marked as a, you know, you might want to watch this person. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so he got remarried to a non-Scientologist, and we saw him on Sundays at that point. He would come over and hang out with us on Sundays. And let's see. So that summer when I was 13, I was working on this amends project in order to get back in the good graces of the church. So I was doing renovations at the church, the local church, which was like, look, at the time it seemed normal and fine, but looking back, I'm like, all right, so they had a bunch of young teens with no experience, no training, no safety equipment, working on things like knocking down walls and laying bricks and like demolition and construction. And it's just like kind of insane.
It's also called child labor, I think.
Yeah, but I was a volunteer.
Sure. So yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think the witnesses did that a lot too, and then you had to be 18 or have somebody sign a waiver or something.
yeah, I don't
That was the
remember there
legal.
being any waivers. I would just like show up, and that was that. And
Also,
you know,
what does that have to do with
fun.
making amends for like whatever you had done wrong? So knocking down the wall in a building makes amends for some sort of moral
Or
failing you
question
had?
mark. Yeah. Yeah, I know, but I was helping. So the the gist is that by leaving the Sea Org, whether I made the choice or not, I had acted against the interests of the church. And so then I had to decide whether I wanted to be part of the group that was helping the church or part of the group that was against the church, or like, you know, did I want to be part of the WOG world, or did I want to be part of the good Scientology group?
Yeah, are you with us or against us?
Yeah, so there's like a series of steps you go through to determine which is the right group to be part of, and it's all like super biased and circular logic. So of course, like the only answer you can possibly come up with is like, I want to be part of Scientology.
Shocking.
Yeah, right.
Imagine that,
So
circular logic.
so that's the doubt formula, and then there's the next formula, or I don't know what order they go in, but after that is you have to then like make amends to the group and like deliver an effective blow to the enemy of the group. I don't remember what I did for that. I probably like handed out some flyers and got somebody to come take a personality test or something, and that way I unwogged somebody, which is a term I made up. I just know, not a real Scientology term.
I like it. I like it.
So yeah, so I just had to do a project to help the church. So I spent an entire summer like doing renovations as part of this amends project, and finally got it like, and then you have to like take it around to everybody in the group and get them to sign off whether they'll allow you back in the group or not. And once you get a majority agreeing to let you back in the group, then you are in the condition of non-existence. So that's just working your way up to being a person again. That's just to become an entity. Yeah, so that was like the beginning of my teens. And then there were a few years where I sort of like had some teenage years. I like was still so I went back to homeschooling at that point, and my mom had sort of tried to structure things more in that year. So we had a schedule, so we had to like start school at 8 a.m. and then, you know, there was like time for English and time for math and whatever, but like I don't remember, there was still like wasn't a curriculum. It was all kind of still self-led. There was just like a schedule on the wall now. So I spent a lot of time just, you know, reading and writing in my journal and writing bad poetry, you know, like teenagers do. But I also started, I discovered AOL chat rooms that year, and that really changed things for me. Being able to talk to people who didn't know I was a Scientologist, who didn't know anything about me, and who came from like, you know, all over the country and had all these different like situations and experiences, was so exciting and so liberating. And I fucking loved it. So I started staying up, you know, all night talking to these strangers on the internet and made some close friends. And like some of those people I remained friends with like through my 20s. One was my best internet friend was in Tennessee, and actually when I was 21, after leaving the church, I actually like took a bus down. It's like a 36-hour bus trip, and like went to meet her in Memphis. So like they were real friendships, and like on a level that I had never had before, because I didn't have to keep up this like Scientology persona, and I could just say what I was thinking, and I could be a dumb teenager, and I could have human emotion and reaction. And so that I was still like, I still knew that Scientology was good and right, and I was like still studying. Part of our school time was spent at the church, because that counts as education. It's the only education that really matters. But part of, you know, this like double life thing like really intensified at that point. Because like as controlling as the church and my mom were, I guess again it was just like arbitrary. Like nobody monitored what I did on the internet, but at the same time, like, you know, I had to conform to like, yeah, I don't know, there's just like this weird mix of like freedom and control, where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, you can't think these thoughts, but also we're not going to watch anything you read. But if you read the
That's
wrong
kind of
thing, then you're in
odd.
trouble.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
odd. Most of us grew up with parents as witnesses who definitely monitored our activities. Some when it's my mom put keyloggers on the computer and stuff so that she could read what was being written and
Oh,
stuff by
wow.
my brothers. Yeah. And so, you know, yeah, there are definitely some tactics used, but I think, do you think that maybe there's just some, I don't know, whether it's just arrogance or whatever, but they just think they're doing such a good job of teaching you these things, and clearly you're one of us, so you're not going to want to be like them, that they just assume that, I mean,
It's
you're
not
a
something to worry about.
Scientologist. I mean,
Yeah.
You're one of
I
us,
think
so
that's
they can't imagine you going the other way.
right. Yeah, that's part of it, I think. I also think, um, God, I feel bad saying this even now. I still feel guilty having these thoughts, but I think that my mom has some pretty heavy narcissistic traits. And I I think that on some level she just couldn't be bothered. Like, it's not causing a problem for me, so I don't really care. When it starts to cause a problem for me, then I'll crack down and be like, how could you do this to me? What a slap in the face. But until then, whatever.
You said it, until it becomes a problem for her. No reason to feel bad saying that. I think any of us who've grown up in an environment like this, most of our parents, uh, most of us have at least probably one parent that has some degree of those narcissistic traits. Doesn't mean they're a pure narcissist, but
Yeah.
it when you're in a group that thinks it is saving the world, that is so grandiose, as to feel like everything revolves around how, and I don't know how many Scientologists there are in the world, but uh,
I don't think
witness,
anybody does.
okay, witnesses, there's 8 million. So yes, there's 8 billion people out there, and everyone's lives revolves around 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, we're all ate up with the J-dubs, and we all have to know, like, they're the ones who are going to save the world. They have the one and only truth. There's a level of grandiosity and narcissism that comes through that. And it's easy, whether you're a pure narcissist or not, to pick up those traits and to,
Yeah.
because you're just so lost in this thing that has overtaken your whole life and dominated you. You don't have time or mental or emotional energy or capacity to spend looking at even your own children and saying, okay, who is this child? Because you're just supposed to make that child a reflection of you, who is a reflection of Scientology
Right.
or the witnesses or whatever. So it's just all about, they can't mirror you and see who you are. They want you to mirror them and be who they are. Um,
Yeah.
and as long as you're not causing the problem, all right, they assume you're just like them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very
So
normal thing that occurs in these situations.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So so yeah, I started making all these friends who weren't Scientologists, and started dating this guy who's like a cousin of a friend of a friend. And the big draw to him initially was he had blue hair, which was like, whoa, what a rebel. How cool is that?
That's awesome.
So we started, he lived like an hour and a half away, and neither of us drove. He was a couple years older than me. But yeah, so he lived a while, like the next state over. So we talked online a lot, we talked on the phone a lot, and I think the thing that like really drew me to him is he would ask me questions and want my opinion, like my personal opinion. And I would like literally like pull out a Scientology dictionary and like start reading to him. And he'd be like, put that away. I want to know what you think. And I was just like, what the fuck? To know what I think. It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what L. Ron Hubbard said. And he's like, well, I don't believe in L. Ron. I think that's bullshit. I think you're brainwashed. What do you think?
I love
And
this guy.
it
What
was,
an evolved
yeah,
kid.
I loved him too. I mean, he certainly wasn't perfect, but I mean, who the fuck is? Um, so yeah, like that, having that questioning in my life for the first time ever was really, it was terrifying and also so appealing. um I yeah, I was just drawn to like having somebody who cared about shit that wasn't Scientology. So we like dated in secret for a while. I didn't want to tell anybody about it because it seemed dangerous. He was definitely like vocally opposed to Scientology. And also he was bipolar and on medication, which is like a huge, not allowed, very bad thing. So I knew that if anybody in the church found out about that, then I would have to disconnect from him like immediately.
Because they're so opposed to psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. Psychiatry is evil. Psychiatry kills. Drugs are mind control and they fuck you up. And, you know, you can't be, you like can't do anything in Scientology if you're on psych meds. So yeah, basically I knew that like the church would view him as like this evil, corrupting influence. And like, I also, like, I believed that he was that, but also I liked it. So yeah, I didn't tell my mom about him for months. And he like came down to visit a few times and I would, you know, just go out and not tell anyone. Or I'd be like, I'm gonna go hang out with Ashley and then like hang out with him all day. But I finally did eventually start to feel guilty. So I told my mom by like doing an OW write-up. So I like wrote down all of the like times that we had met up in secret and all of the times I had lied to her and whatever. And I handed her this write-up and I was like, here you go. So now you know, and I've handled it and all the ethics stuff is taken care of and now we can just move on. And that was my way of like not having like an ethics program forced on me, is just do it myself. So then he like came down and she met him and she did not care for him at all. He was polite enough, but you know, he just obviously wasn't into it. And also he looked like a punk. And I was like getting into punk music and like starting to change how I dressed. And so yeah, she didn't like him. She didn't like the influence that he was obviously having, even though she didn't know about like the real bad stuff and like the questions he was asking that were like trying to get me to think. So anyway, we dated for a couple years, from like right before I turned 14, I guess, till right before I turned 16. And we broke up a couple times, and each time was because the church or my mom basically told me to. Like at some point it came up that he was on meds and like that I had to break up with him because of that, but then like secretly started seeing him again and eventually admitted to it and like had to do another handling. And but eventually after a couple years there was like a final intervention, and like so I came home one day and this guy was in the front yard with my mom and he was a Sea Org member. I could tell from his uniform, but like I didn't know who he was. And he like sat me down and he was this really jovial little man, and then just like real casually started like trying to get me to confess to whatever. He's like asking questions like, so there's this routine when like somebody doesn't want to like confess to something, you start to go to like, it's called the murder routine. So like if you think maybe they like, I don't know, stole something, you're like, well, and they don't want to confess to it, you're like, well, did you murder someone? And they're like supposed to be like, oh, of course I didn't do that, all I did was. So he started asking me questions like, well, did you have sex with this guy in your mom's bed? And I was like, who are you and why are you asking me these terrible, humiliating questions? And it's just in this like real casual, like offhand way. And I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? So anyway, I like ended up admitting that I had been seeing him again and that, you know, that he was super opposed to Scientology and that like he had shown me an anti-Scientology website, which was like also I like really wasn't supposed to look at. That was like a big deal. And that he didn't like my mom, and he had been saying bad things to my mom about my mom to me. And so like I just ended up like spilling the beans on like all of the bad things about him. And so then I was like, he sent me to the ethics officer at the local church, and we ended up doing like this big ethics program, and I had to like do all these conditions again and decide if I wanted to be part of the Scientology or part of the group that was like supporting psych medications and hating on my mom and hating on Scientology and whatever. And this time it stuck because I broke up with him and like got real self-righteous and real angry about all of the bullshit he'd been feeding me and like what a bad influence he had been. Like I got really angry at him. I'm sure I was angry at the church and just taking it out on him because like that way was futile, but like he couldn't retaliate in any significant way. So I was real nasty to him, and I feel really bad about that still.
We do
But
what we
anyway,
have to do to survive in those situations.
yeah. So finally, like fully ended it with him, and then like, of course, at that point, I had to like dive headfirst back into Scientology because like I had just denounced the other things, so now like this is all I have left. So I got really into it again, and like really dedicated myself to it. And that's when I started like doing, like getting auditing for the first real time, and like started working on like going up the bridge and like doing like adult courses and adult training. And I was like all gung-ho about it, yeah. So then of course I was a good recruit candidate again for the Sea Org, since I had like, done the program from the previous time. I was qualified to join the Sea Org again. And then one of my brothers joined staff at a local church, and I took that as like a challenge. I was like, oh, if he can do it, then I can do it again too. But once you've been in the Sea Org, you can't work on staff at a lower organization. It's like Sea Org or nothing. So I tried to join staff with my brother and they wouldn't let me. But I didn't really want to, like I had enough of a life outside, or like enough of a life at that point, that I didn't want to just give it all up again to join the Sea Org. So I wasn't just like ready to sign another contract and leave. And also at that point I was like, I wanted to have kids, and I like had some idea about like education and like wanting to go to college or at least finish high school, or like at least get my GED or something. So, I was really dedicated to Scientology, but I wasn't quite, and I wanted to work for Scientology, but I didn't want to like give up everything to join the Sea Org again. But like that was enough of an in that the recruiters had a hold on me. So for like a week or so, I was studying in like one of the course rooms at the local church, and they would like wait outside the course room as it was like ending for the day, and scoop me up and take me upstairs to like a little office and like literally lock the door, and I'd be like on the other side of the desk, and there'd be 2 or 3 people like in front of the door, and we just like sit there for hours with them. Like it's called handling my considerations, just like dealing with all of the reasons that I don't want to join, and like showing me, they have like these big binders that are full of like L. Ron Hubbard policies, and they like, it's all divided into sections for like common considerations or objections to joining. So, they just like flip it up and be like, okay, read this paragraph. And like all of it was basically just like, here's why anything you want to do in life that isn't join the Sea Org is out ethics and off purpose, and what you should really be doing is just joining the Sea Org. So like,
don't they need members to have children?
No, because we're not these bodies. We're trying to leave this plane of existence and move on to the next higher spiritual level. And like,
so if there wasn't Scientology on this earth anymore, that would be the goal, for there not to be, because you have to have children to perpetuate the.
I don't think it's really thought that far out, honestly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there is some explanation for that, but I think it's just like, we're spiritual beings, and these body, like when you create a new body, like a baby, you're not creating a new Satan. Satan already exists and is just like coming from another lifetime.
So you don't need those.
So you don't need new bodies. They're just a hindrance. Like, we're just trying to get to a point where we're all operating Thetans and don't need our bodies and don't need this physical universe. Which is not to say that we wouldn't still use it or like, you know, walk around in bodies, but we wouldn't need them. That's like down the line, but that's the goal. So yeah, family is not important. Family is just a distraction. Kids are not, they don't fucking matter.
Yeah, they're objects that get in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So my considerations, my objections to joining, the main ones were that I wanted to finish high school. Finish is a loose word because I never started high school, but and I wanted to have kids someday. And they were like, well, you can get your or you can, you know, as a minor, you're required to go to school. So even if you join the Sea Org, you'll still finish high school. You'll get a diploma. And you don't need kids. You've already played that game. Like, you've already done that in past lives, so you don't need to anymore. This is more important. So anyway, it like went on and on and on for hours every day for like a week. And finally I broke and I signed, and then I went home and told my mom, and she was pissed at me, which was really jarring. Because I mean, she was like, you're betraying me, you're abandoning me, I need you to help with your brothers. This is a slap in the face. That was like a favorite phrase of hers.
Shouldn't she be excited that you're going on to do your whole...
Yeah, like, you've been telling me my whole life that you're raising me to be a Sea Org member, and now I joined the Sea Org and I'm betraying you? What? So I guess she actually, I don't remember exactly how it played out, but she got in trouble for saying that to me. So she had to do like an ethics handling about that, which then boiled down to like, it was my dad's fault. Somehow this became my dad's fault.
Of course.
And he had like no involvement with the church at that point. He had another kid with his new wife that year, and was just like out. And I had he was still hanging out with us on Sundays, but I, you know, was a teenager and I had other friends and I had a job and just like didn't care as much. So I hadn't spent as much time with him. So we didn't have much of a relationship at that point. In July of 2003, when I was 16, I left home again and got on a plane for the first time and went down to Florida and joined the Sea Org at Flag, which is like it's called the Mecca of Scientology.
What's the city that it's in Florida?
Clearwater.
Clearwater, that's it. I've been thinking this whole time when you said it. In Florida, yes, Clearwater, that's right.
Yeah, it's like just south of Tampa, some St. Pete area, which I don't know, doesn't mean anything to me because even though I lived there for almost 4 years, I never really left the compound.
Of course.
So, so yeah, when I got there, I mean, I had been studying at the local church for a while at that point and was like known as like a good student. I like got through things quickly and was eager and excited. And so I was slotted to go onto the technical training corps, which is basically my job would be to train full time in order to become like somebody in the technical department. So like the training or auditing delivery, like I was being trained as a word clearer. So I had to learn how to use the e-meter, and then I had to learn all these processes for helping people find words that they didn't understand. And there's very specific steps for everything. It's called standard tech. And so I had to like learn and drill and memorize all of these procedures for word clearing, which honestly I kind of loved because I love words and I loved reading, and dictionaries were interesting, and like we had to like look up etymologies for words in order to get like a full understanding of them, and I really loved diving into all of that. So but anyway, so the training it was like full-time training. So I was living gosh, I don't even know where to start with all this. There's like, if you have questions, just stop and ask, because I know I'm like blowing by so many things that
Oh no.
just seem normal to me.
All I know is that earlier in this episode, you created a word called unwog, and you're talking about being a word clear. So I have to call this all into question. No, I think it's so they're wanting you to be a word clearer. Can you like, so you were 16 at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can a kid, which you are at 16, can a child be doing these things? In other words, are you seen and respected enough as a child to be able to, like, if I'm a 40-year-old man and I'm being brought before you, to get my words cleared, like, but
it seems weird, right?
We're all infinite, that it doesn't really matter.
Yes, that. So I was definitely not the youngest person, and like it was totally normal. I know it seems super weird, but like, there would be like. But it makes
sense within the context of, okay, so we've all been here before, so age doesn't matter.
And if you're like a just like got all this jargon flying through my head. So your age doesn't matter. It's how good you are at it, basically. Like if you're a personable person, so you like naturally get along well with people, and you are trained, so you've like everything is very like there's pattern. There are words that you say over and over, and if you drill it, and you do all this training so that you don't even have to think about it. You can just say all these, go through these scripts basically. But if you can do that while also remaining like personable and like having like a connection with the person you're sitting across from, then you're good at it. And then it doesn't matter how old you are, because you've got that one-on-one connection, and you can be effective, like whatever that means.
So it's almost like, if you can compartmentalize yourself and still be yourself and just be a kind person to a person, but also be able to slip into this rote repetition of verbiage when needed, and then come right back to yourself and being a kind person.
So there's a drill that you do that is about saying the same thing over and over again, but saying it newly each time. So like you drill that over and over for hours. You say the same lines over and over until every time it's as if you've never said it before. So like that's part of the training.
Wow.
So yeah, if you're good at that, it like, you know, it doesn't matter
If you
how
can
old
do the
you are.
job, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
how old you are.
yeah, exactly. And like everybody who's there understands that and is like bought in on it. So
All right. So you start
I'm
in,
sure there were some like 60-year-old men who were like, what the fuck is this kid telling me to do? But
yeah.
I was also a Sea Org member, so I had this status above the public
Yeah.
where they had to respect me either
Wow.
way.
Okay, so how does it so how does this go? You know, you're learning to be a word clearer. Sounds like you were probably pretty good at it. How did it do you enjoy it? Do you get into it? Do you start doing this? Is this your full-time gig basically?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna back up a little. So I arrived, I did the EPF again, which is like the initial boot camp, the Estates Project Force. So that's like half and like initial indoctrination and half manual labor. Got through that pretty quickly, was put into full-time training, um, which started off really well because I was a pretty fast student, but then I got super stuck. And like there was this one drill where you have to sit across from a person and you're 3 feet apart and you're sitting in a straight back chair and you have to look into their eyes for 2 hours straight without excessive blinking or any movement or twitching or your mind wandering or getting sleepy or getting bored or having your eyes water or like any physical manifestations of discomfort or emotional anything. Like you just have to sit there and be there and stare into another person's eyes for an unbroken 2 hours. And I could not fucking do it. So it was like, so my schedule was, at the time I was living in a dorm that was like a converted Quality Inn. So like they bought Quality Inn and then turned each motel room into a dorm with like 4 bunk bed or 4 bunks in it, so 2 bunk beds. So and that was it was called the QI for Quality Inn, but it was like 20 to 30 minutes away from the base. So I had to get on a bus at like 7, go to the mess hall, which is where we ate, have breakfast, report for muster at 8 a.m. and start the course training or, you know, start my training for the day at 8 a.m. And then there was a half-hour break for lunch from like 12 to 12:30 or 12:30 to 1 or something. And then another muster where we all like gathered and did a roll call and whatever. And then more training until like 5:30 or 6 or something. There's like a 15-minute break for a snack in there. And then lunch or dinner was 45 minutes and then back to training until 10 p.m. And then get on the bus, half an hour ride back to the place, lights out by 11 p.m. And like lights out was strict, like security would come around if your light was still on, you'd get like a report written on you. So that was my schedule.
What time did you get up the next day to get ready?
I had to be on a bus at 7, so like 6:30. And then also like they did dorm inspections every day, so your bed had to be made to like Navy standards. And like they did like white glove inspections, so like you had to make sure your room was like cleaned, all your clothes were folded, your bathroom sink was wiped out with no toothpaste in it. So like yeah, everything had to be like perfect and spotless, and you had half an hour at night in order to accomplish this, in addition to like whatever personal stuff you might want to do. But like what the fuck is that? Like take a shower, go to bed. So that so for a couple months, in like my first year at Flag, that was my life. It was just like that schedule and all of that time, I would be sitting in a chair staring into another person's eyes and failing at it. And like the fact that I couldn't do it meant that I couldn't confront, which meant that I was avoiding, which meant that I had overts and withholds. So it was just this endless cycle of like being sent to ethics to do ethics handlings about why I couldn't confront, and then coming back up and trying some more, and like having what I can now recognize as like anxiety attacks, and just like, but like any expression of negative emotion is misemotion, which I actually didn't know wasn't a word until I was like 27. Or, you know, human emotion and reaction, and case on post, which is like, you're doing a job, so you're not supposed to like allow your you know, emotional baggage basically to interfere. So like, again, it's like any emotion you might have is case on post. So
I don't care who you are, staring into someone's eyes for 2 hours without blink. Well, I mean, maybe you were
you can blink, just not excessively.
but not excessively, yeah. Which of course they get to determine arbitrarily, I'm sure, what is excessive. But like blinking and your eyes watering, or like I have ADHD, my brain would be wandering. Like that's there's no possible way.
It's fucking inhumane. It's insane.
That is insane.
And like, I'm sure, I mean, it's a hypnotizing thing, right? It's yeah. I did eventually
from yourself.
Yeah. I did eventually pass the drill.
Of course.
I'm sure that my mind wandered during that time, but I was able to like fall asleep or cry. So I was like, I'll fucking take it. I'm so done. I'm so done. So that was absolutely miserable. It like stands out as like one of the most miserable periods of my life to this day, because like, of course, all of my self-worth and identity are caught up in like being a good student, and like, you know, only good students are put into full-time training because it's you know, it's a commitment on the church's part. They're, you know, they're feeding you and giving you a place to sleep, and you're not,
and that sweet $50.
Yeah, and you're not contributing anything yet because you're just in training. So yeah, I felt like I was failing everybody, and I was a disappointment to everybody, and I also couldn't talk about how I felt because that would be nattering, which is saying bad things, which again, obviously means that you have overts and withholds. So it was just terrible. It was just like this super lonely, super miserable period where I was like, I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. Anyway, I finally did it. Or at least said I did.
That's horrifying to have to sit there and do something day after day that clearly, I mean, I don't even want to just say you're not good at it. I don't think any normal person would be super great at that easily.
Yeah.
That's the very difficult thing to do. And it's very psychological torture to have someone sit there and do that every day.
For 14 hours a day.
You sat there for 14 hours a day and 2 hours
I mean, it's like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. with a half-hour lunch break, a 15-minute snack break, and a 45-minute dinner break.
The whole time doing the staring thing?
Yes. Or being in ethics for not being able to do it.
Holy crap. That's, my God. Well, I mean, that's psychological torment. That's what that is. It's
Yeah,
to
it was
break you
pretty
until you
bad.
can do it. Um,
Yeah.
God.
So I did it. I managed to get through it, got through the rest of those drills, and then did the course to learn how to use an e-meter, which again, you have to sit and do this staring thing, but then you do it, you're staring at the e-meter. It's called confronting. You have to confront the e-meter for 2 hours, again, with like no reactions. And on that one, I actually passed out. Like I was staring at it and my vision went black, and then I like woke up on the floor. But it was like, okay, you're back. All right, get back in the chair, get back to it. Like something came up and the only way out is through, and you just got to keep going. Which actually I just remembered, you do these same drills. They're called training routines or TRs. You do them. There's like other courses where you do them at a less professional level, so you don't have to do 2 hours necessarily, but you like go through the motions like doing the same drills. And so I did these when I was a kid too, and I actually passed out once when I was like 7 or 8, probably 8 or 9 actually. It was the same thing. Like I was just sitting in a chair staring at another person. It wasn't for 2 hours, but I like woke up on the bathroom floor. And like it was, a kid just passed out, but it was like, okay, well, go get a snack, come back to it. Yeah.
This is what we
Anyway,
call abuse. It's very
but
abusive.
it wasn't their fault. It was my fault because
Well,
I couldn't.
of course, Laurel.
No,
It's
yeah,
always your fault. Nothing
yeah,
has ever been the fault of any of these organizations. It's always the stupid humans' fault. It's not the
yeah,
organizational, structure that's at fault.
yeah.
Goodness.
So anyway, I did finally finish my training. And like I did the word clearer training course, and like things got better. I got better at it, got better at going through the motions. And so then I was I was positioned in one of the course rooms as the word clearer for that course room. And I did really like the job. My statistic was number of words cleared. So I had to keep track of, so there's like 8 methods of word clearing. One is just like spot checking. So you're like going through a page and you're like, okay, what does the word different mean? And they have to tell you what it means. And if they have the wrong definition or whatever, then they have to go look it up, or you can like help them look it up in the dictionary. And then to clear a word, you have to find the definition that fits, use it in sentences until you have a conceptual understanding of what it means. And then you have to go through every other definition of the word and use each one in sentences. And then you have to clear up any idioms or phrases that use that word, and then the etymology of the word. And then you can go back to what you were studying and read it again and make sure it makes sense. And if you're reading something and it doesn't make sense, or like you can't figure out, if it's just like confusing, you don't get it, the only reason for that is that there's a word right before the confusion that you didn't understand. It couldn't possibly because L. Ron Hubbard is a fucking maniac and just spewing words on a page that don't fucking mean anything. It's definitely just that you don't understand some word. So my job was, whenever somebody was like stuck in something and couldn't figure it out, or there's other physical manifestations where like if you're falling asleep while reading, that means that you passed a word that you don't understand. So or if you're like twitching, or like you're distracted, or you're like fiddling with something with your hands, like all of these things mean that you've passed a word you don't understand. So my job was to notice these manifestations, or some, like the supervisor would send people to me if they noticed them. And I would have to like help people locate like where the confusion was, and then using one of these methods, find the word that they didn't understand, help them clear it up, and then help, like they would restudy. And if it made sense at that point, then they could go on. If it didn't, then we had to find another word. So this, while I did really enjoy it, I really liked words. I liked helping people. I loved that moment where people were like, oh, I get it. That makes sense. That was all really cool. I've also come to realize that this like hyper focus on individual words and their meanings, and like always being vigilant for like, did you go by an MU, a misunderstood word, misunderstood MU, it's fucking traumatizing. And like, why would anybody want to read ever if like you're constantly worried about passing something you don't understand? And then there's like checkouts where like after you read a document, you have to, another student will like spot check you and like make sure that you understand it, and like have you use little pieces to like demonstrate concepts, like here's John, the little thing, and he walks over to Billy and they go over to this house and they do this, and to like demonstrate concepts. So there's like, yeah, there's just so much like focus on understanding every individual word that like, how can you possibly focus on the bigger picture? So yeah, anyway, I got pretty well situated in that job, and it was, my schedule was pretty much the same. I think I had a slightly long, I had a 45-minute lunch break and an hour dinner break, so got an extra half hour free time. But everything about how you were treated within the organization was based on your statistic, or the statistic of the department that you were in. So like, even if I like figured out a system where like I could just do like one extra word each week, and then my statistic would like keep going up incrementally, but it was like manageable. But like if my course room had like fewer people finish a course that week, then like we would all be in trouble. And like, regardless of whether I had done anything, I was part of that group. So whatever penalties were put on them or us as a group, like included everybody. So like, I'm actually going to back up a little bit. When I was 18, I like hadn't dated anybody the whole time I was there, but this new guy joined the Sea Org, and he was a year younger than me, but I was like, all right, I'm ready. Like, I'm sick of being single. This guy, I like him. So we started dating, got married 6 months later, which is a really long time to wait. Like by like, and I mean, dating is a really loose term. Like, we held hands on the bus home, and like, that's about it. We like didn't spend time together. We weren't really friends. We didn't have any time to spend, but like, you know, we held hands when we could, pretty much.
So you got married at 18, you said, and
I had just turned 19, and he had just turned 18. So we dated for 6 months, but like immediately, like as soon as we like became a couple, people were like, oh great, when are you getting married? And like, he actually like got pulled out of a staff meeting one night because like he was sitting next to me and somebody saw that and like pulled him out to like give him a lecture about like being careful and like making sure he didn't do anything that could get him in trouble, like sexually, which is anything. So it was like, all eyes were on us, and it was like, when are you getting married? 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 So like, the fact that we lasted 6 months without getting married was like a long time.
I thought so. So you are allowed to get married then in the Sea Org.
Yeah.
So you're not. I thought you said earlier you're not allowed to date. I may be wrong. Is that just you're not allowed to date for very long because we gotta get you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you can date, but it doesn't like you can't go on dates because you have no time off,
Right.
and you can't even make out. So like, and you can't spend time together really, other than like your little moments here and there and like meal times. So like, it's not really dating. You're not like getting to know the person. Yeah. So you can date, but then there's also like immediate pressure to get married because they're worried that you might do something sexual. And if you do, then you are in big trouble and like have to be taken off of your job, which causes trouble for everybody. They need to replace you. And then you're like, you can get sent to the RPF, which is the Rehabilitation Project Force, which I know like all of the big stories talk about it. It's like you're still part of the organization, but you're not allowed to talk to anybody. And you're like doing, actually don't know much about it because I've never been involved, and it's like very hidden. It's like secret underground. They're not allowed to talk to anybody. They have to run everywhere, like literally run.
I've heard stories on other podcasts where like I don't know, whatever they do, they clean, they do a lot of menial tasks, and they have to literally run to everything they do and just be like this hidden figure inside the organization. And that just sounds horrible.
So if you do anything sexual, like not even necessarily have sex, but like if you like heavy petting is what it's called. If you do any heavy petting, you could get put on the RPF. So it's like, there's like all of this pressure built up around it.
Do you all have like a Scientology led wedding? Are the weddings different? Are they their own things, or do you just go to the Justice of the Peace and get married or something?
There are like some wedding ceremony like scripts that L. Ron Hubbard has written. Some people do like have a full on like wedding, like a kind of normal wedding. We had it was like a few of our friends and then somebody who was ordained, and she like read a little like 3-minute blurb, and then we said I do's, and that was that. Somebody signed some paperwork, and it was like a 5-minute thing, wearing t-shirts. But yeah, like some people do have more of like a real wedding, but again, like it all needs to be, it can't be a distraction from your job. So it has to be on your time off. All planning has to be on your time off. Pay for it yourself. So time off, if your stats are up and your department stats are up, you could in theory take a Saturday off every 2 weeks, but that doesn't ever actually work out because you always need somebody to cover your job. So like there's just not enough people for you to take every 2 weeks off. So that's like the only time off. It's called a
you're running on the hamster wheel all the rest of the time. I mean, just doing the things they've got you doing.
And also or at least when I was there, I'm fairly confident this is still true, but I can't say for sure. When I was there, we had no internet access. Nobody was allowed cell phones. Any phone calls were made using the organization's phones in a particular room that was monitored by security, and they could like pick up the line anytime they wanted. And also there were like always lines of people waiting to use them during meal times. So there wasn't a lot of contact with the outside world. And then all mail was read and censored, incoming and outgoing.
Like prison.
Yep.
So Okay, so you get married at 19, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So does that change life for you in any way?
Not really. I got to move from the QI, which is the shitty dorm, like half an hour away, to the primary campus dorm, which was called the Hacienda, which was just like 5 or 7 minutes away or something. So I got to sleep in a whole extra 15 minutes.
I was saying, you just picked up 15, 20 minutes there. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, on either side.
Like a vacation.
Yeah. And also the new one had like a gym and a swimming pool. Not that there was time to use them. But yeah, we got to like move into a room together, which wasn't an automatic thing. Like I had to petition for it and we had to wait a few weeks and I had to like really push for that to happen. But it was like 1 bedroom in a 3 bedroom apartment. So with 2 other couples. So it wasn't like I had more space. And then we were also on slightly different schedules. So he would come home after I was already in bed, and then I would leave before he got up, or vice versa. So I still didn't spend much time together. Didn't talk much. Like I honestly feel like I never really knew him. Like we weren't friends. We didn't really know each other. We didn't really get along when we did talk. Like not that we fought or like anything. We just like, it was just like, I was like that one because I'm sick of being single. And he was like, okay, I've never had a girlfriend before. And then we just like found ourselves married because of all this peer pressure.
Sure.
And it was, I don't know, it doesn't feel like it was ever a real relationship. But anyway, as far as like everything, so I was talking about how like penalties could be enforced on like an entire department or whatever. So at some point, the whole organizations, like the whole flag organizations statistics were like not doing well. Like we weren't getting new people in or whatever. Like we weren't getting a lot of money in. And so there was like this huge crackdown, and our division and our department specifically were kind of like at the heart of it. So we like our meal times were shortened to 15 minutes, and as a punishment we were only allowed to eat rice and beans, which means like in the back of so there's like a separate building that was like the cafeteria, which we called the mess hall, and then like in the back there were these like big coolers, and like they were just like these sheet trays of like beans and rice, like just plain beans, plain rice, and that was all we were allowed to eat. We weren't allowed to go into like the stores to buy food. We had like meetings during the rest of that mealtime, so instead of like having free time to settle down or hang out or whatever, we did like military marching drills, or we would just get yelled at for that time, or we do like chanting things where like they call it Chinese school because apparently L. Ron Hubbard went to China and he learned that this is how they do school, which is whatever, won't even get into it. But so they'll like take a policy or a quote or something from L. Ron Hubbard and they'll print it out real big and use a stick and like point to each word. And so they'll do like phrases like the future of Scientology, and like point to each word, and we'd all have to chant back, the future of Scientology depends on what you do, depends on what you do. And so it's like that kind of like repetition as a group, indoctrination / brainwashing / punishment, because that's what it was. And then after work, like after the day ended at 10 p.m., we would have another meeting, and like then we would be sent to do, we would do like some more of this drilling or marching or chanting or whatever, and then would be sent to do manual labor. And again, we were doing things like demolition and or like scrubbing the kitchen, which is like a big commercial kitchen, or you know, I remember like having to clean grease traps, or like one time we were like bust out to this big warehouse and we had to like do, I don't even remember what we were doing. It was like some kind of filing, but there was like no electricity in the building, so we were like doing it all by flashlight at like midnight. Or like another time they had like bought this new building that I think used to be like a hospital or something, and so we were cleaning it up so that they could start converting it to whatever it was going to be. And so we were like cleaning up all this like debris with, again, like no lights and no safety equipment and no training and no fucking idea what we were doing. But we like weren't allowed to talk during any of this, or like there would be like security guards like and ethics officers like standing around watching us, and like if anybody laughed, that was like the worst thing, because like we're definitely not allowed to have fun or like make jokes, because this is serious business, you're being punished. So anyway, shit like that. And this kind of thing like went on for a few weeks and it wasn't getting better. So then it escalated and we were put into what they call pigs birthing, which means
Pigs birthing, like a pig
pigs
birthing a sow?
No, birthing like a berth on a ship, like where you live. It's all like Navy terms or nautical terms.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the original intent of pigs birthing was like if somebody was super messy and like couldn't keep their berth or their dorm clean, then they were sent to live in like a shithole dorm with like no electricity and like no heat and whatever, and like they were supposed to learn from this that they had to respect their space and keep it nice. But it was just used as like, okay, well, this other shit isn't working, so now you're all going to be sent to live in this dorm that has no electricity and no heat and no hot water and not enough beds because we're sending an entire department there. So like it's like a 3-bedroom apartment and there were maybe like 30 of us like sleeping on the floor in sheets in December. I mean, it's Florida, so it's not freezing, but like it's still like sleeping on a sheet.
It's still messed
on the
up
floor in the winter.
what the temperature is.
Yeah. And like throughout all of this, we're still supposed to function on our normal schedule throughout the day. Like nothing is wrong. Like everything is normal.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah, exactly. I remember at one point, like after one of these mornings, I like made a sarcastic comment under my breath to a friend as we were like climbing up the stairs to to start the day, about how like I had slept on a sheet that night, and my boss's boss overheard, and she like pulled me into an office and started screaming at me about how like if I had a problem with it, then like I needed to get the stats up and solve the issue and not just like complain and natter about it, because like, and it was like the most extreme and blatant, like this has nothing to do with me or really any of us. Like the fact that we don't have enough students in the course room is not our fucking fault. And yet we're being punished as individuals and like told daily, several times a day by like the highest people in the church, that we are individually pieces of total shit who don't deserve anything. And like the fact that we're taking from the church, like taking food and taking shelter and taking pay from the church while we're such pieces of shit is like completely unacceptable. And like just like went on and on. Anyway, and I remember the reason I backed up to talk about getting married first is I remember one of these nights when I got home, like before going to bed on my floor, I like went back to like my actual apartment and like had to knock on the door for my husband to open the door. And I was about to go in and he was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, I miss you. Like, I wanted to say hi." And I like started crying. And he was like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you. Get your stats up," and like slammed the door in my face. And I was just like, "Oh, I have nobody. I can't say anything to anybody." Yeah, I remember being like pissed off about it, like knowing that it wasn't right and it wasn't fair and it wasn't okay, but also knowing that like I couldn't I couldn't do anything about it. And like maybe I did deserve it, or like even if I didn't deserve it, like maybe it was just the way things were supposed to be. But like either way, like there wasn't anything I could do. I didn't have no control over my life or anything about it.
Yeah, no, they have control over your life. They own you. And it's just so dehumanizing to see your husband react in that way. It's just, again, the way humans are kind of viewed as objects to controlled rather than people with feelings or HE and R's or whatever,
Yeah.
to be managed or helped or whatever the case may be. You're just like little machines, little robots that are just supposed to walk around, and the numbers just have to go up and things just have to happen. And they don't, no excuses, right?
Yeah.
That's really rough. How long? So I guess he wasn't in your department, so he didn't have to go.
Right.
How long did you endure this? Where the
I
numbers
remember it
weren't good.
being like 3 weeks or a month or something of like escalation. So I think it was like a week or 2 weeks of like being in pigs birthing, but like the whole period of like it being really bad was like about a month. And then like it just, I don't know what happened, like it kind of got better and the pressure came off and it was okay again. I don't know.
Did your numbers
Not in
change, or
trouble
did it
anymore.
just?
The department's numbers must have. It didn't have anything to do with me. I didn't do anything to change it. I didn't see any like mark, or I don't remember seeing any like, "Oh, we did this and this changed this and now we're doing better." It was just like, "Oh, okay, it changed." Thank God it changed. I mean, yeah, I don't know what happened, but then things kind of went back to normal. Forget about it, move on. So that was in December of 2006, or like November into December. And then in mid-January of 2007, so this was like right after I turned 20, one day my husband just didn't come home at all. Like usually he would come home late, but he just didn't come home at all. And then and I was like, okay, whatever, like maybe they got in trouble and they like had to stay up all night working or whatever. Like, I don't know, there's some excuse. But then that afternoon, I got pulled into an office, like an ethics office, and was told that he had been kicked out of the Sea Org, and they slid divorce papers across the table and were like, "Sign these." And I was just like, what? What? No. What? And it was really like that casual. It was like, okay, well, Sage has been kicked out and we can't tell you anything about why. So here's the divorce papers. Let's go. Let's sign them. Move on. And I was like, can I talk to him? And they were like, no, he's gone. I was like, okay, well, can I call him? And they're like, no, you can't talk to him. He's psychotic. You can't talk to him. I was like, what do you mean he's psychotic? Like, he was fine yesterday. And they're like, yeah, something came up and you can't talk to him. So just sign. So I was like freaking out. And I refused to sign the papers, which, like, thinking back, like, must have taken some like strength, because like the expectation was that I would just like, of course, sign, because like I can't be married to somebody who's not in the Sea Org.
Yeah, get your numbers up, right?
Yeah.
You know, that callous way of being.
Yeah. So but yeah, so they finally agreed to like get me into session, which means like get me some auditing, some counseling to like deal with why I was having such a reaction. Because it couldn't possibly just be that you just told me that I wasn't allowed to have the relationship I've been in for the last year and a half, or even say goodbye. So for a couple weeks, I was like starting to get some auditing, and I was like going back and forth between being like, okay, I can get over it and move on, and I'm better off without him anyway. And then like I'd get home and I'd just like cry at night. And I like immediately got moved out of like the single room into a dorm with like 6 other people. And I didn't know, I don't think I knew any of them. That might not be true, but I wasn't close with any of them at any rate. And they got really sick of my crying real fast. And I remember one of them on like the 3rd or 4th day being like, I'm really fucking sick of this. You just need to knock it off and knock off the HNR and the case on post and figure it out. Just get over it. And I was like, sorry, I'm upset. Sorry, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry. Sorry, I have feelings. I should stop having feelings. So then I started hiding my crying. But I was just like, between the pig's birthing thing that had just happened in like December, and this was like a month later, or a month and a half later, I was just like, I can't, I'm fucking done. I can't do this. And then there's like all this drama around like my, I don't want to get into details because it's just too complicated, but basically like my folder that had all like my auditing information got lost, and nobody would look for it because I was low priority, because I was staff and not public, so they weren't making any money, so nobody shit basically. And so there was like all these complications around that, and every time I went to look for it, I would be told like, you're in the way, get out of the way, you're being a problem, stop being a problem. So I would like go back to whatever, and like everywhere I went, basically I'd just be told like, you're being a problem, handle it, make it go right, stop being a problem. And so I was like trying so hard to like do the right thing and, you know, get the auditing that would help me get over this and help me move on. And it was just like roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And eventually I was like, I can't fucking do this. I don't know what to do. But I can't do this. And I wanted to see my husband again, or at least to like talk to him before ending it. But I couldn't do that. So I decided I was going to leave, which is a really big deal. And like the only legit way to leave the Sea Org is to do what's called routing out, which is like following a series of steps on what they call a routing form, because it like routes you from one person to another to like do each of these steps. But part of like a big part of that would have been security checking, which is, you know, confessionals on an e-meter for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I knew then that if I went through that process, I would eventually decide that I was in the wrong and I was just a shitty person, and I would change my mind and I would stay. And I was like, even if that's true, like even if I am a shitty person and I am in the wrong, I can't stay. So I'm not going to do the right way. I'm going to do the illegal underground way, which is to self-harm and become a security risk. And if there's, so if you are quote unquote suicidal, then they definitely don't want a dead body on their property. So you have to be removed from the property within 24 hours. So like everybody in the Sea Org knows that's like the quick way to get out is to cut yourself. Which is so fucked up on so many levels. The main ones being that like the only way out is to physically hurt yourself, and another being that if you are so desperate that you physically hurt yourself, their only reaction is get out. So
Does
that's
this
what I did.
happen a lot?
Regularly enough. Like I knew several people who left that way. And of course, like the story that gets told about it is like that they tried to kill themselves, like not just like, oh, they were trying to leave so they scratched their arm, but like they tried to kill themselves and they're psychotic and we got rid of them.
I have to ask, I mean, does anybody ever just give them the old one finger salute and walk out the door? I mean, is there,
You
like, can
can't,
that
so
happen?
no. So there's the way Clearwater is set up, or like the way the basic Clearwater is set up, there's buildings all over the town and there's cameras on all of them. So, and there's a huge security force that is in the Sea Org, like security members who are watching those cameras at all times. So they basically see everything that happens in the downtown area, like from any of the buildings, they can see what's going on. And then where you live is they're gated compounds, and the only way out is over a like 10-foot barbed wire fence or through the gate, which is manned by security 24/7, and they need to like open the gate electronically. So there,
Could you run between, if you're at home and you're going to the Sea Org to work, can you just go out the gate and then just walk into the ether? I mean,
in theory, yes, but they will physically stop you.
will they like pick
there's
you
more
up
than one
and
security person there.
will
So
they like
like
put you in a van and take you back?
Yeah. Yeah. If you even got as far as the gate, because there's like the person in the security booth manning the gate. And then there's like a security person, like you take buses everywhere. So like there's a person at the door of the bus watching everybody get on. And then there's a person at the gate watching the
Oh,
gate open
so
and close. Yeah.
you never even have your own autonomy between leaving your dorm and going to the Sea Org facility.
The base. Yeah.
You're on the base, you're on their buses too, and they're watching you. So if
and
you
then like
were
from
to,
the
they
base,
kidnap you in the middle of downtown and take you back?
I've never tried it, but I believe so.
I just wonder. I mean,
So
obviously, they have mental and emotional control anyway.
Yeah.
You know, that they have people brainwashed and people feeling horrible about themselves and people who are unattached from the outside world. So, you know,
So I expect that like if somebody physically walked out and like was in the middle of downtown and there were people around and they made like a big fuss and like, you know, didn't go quietly, that, you know, they wouldn't like kidnap them in any visible way,
Right.
but I'm sure that they would follow them. And I suspect that they would take them back at the earliest opportunity. I know they're not legally supposed to use physical force, but like you're also not supposed to legally let kids work 18-hour days. So
yeah, we don't care about legalities, right?
yeah. And so like there was one time when during my so when you're working, like even if you're not like in training, when you're working on staff or in the Sea Org, you're supposed to have like a study period so that you can also like work on getting up the bridge. So during one of my study periods, I had been given verbal okay to walk to the public library, which was a few blocks away, but I didn't have it in writing, so it wasn't real. Because if it's not written, it isn't true. And the corollary, if it is written by L. Ron Hubbard, then it is absolutely true. But so I was walking to the library and I was like 3 blocks away from any Scientology building. And this ethics officer running up behind me and like grabbed me by the arm and was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was in like so much trouble because I was walking on a city street without written permission. But I was like nowhere near a Scientology building and they still knew exactly where I was and came to get me. So like they've got that whole fucking place covered. And that was like a totally legit, like I wasn't doing anything wrong as far as I knew.
So your path out then ended up the self-harm route.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it wasn't like, I definitely was not trying to kill myself. I definitely didn't even want to hurt myself. I like found a safety pin in the bathroom cabinet and like scratched my arm until it like looked nasty, but like you can do more damage to like, you know, falling on the sidewalk. Like it was nothing, but it looked bad and the intent was there. So I was kicked out.
How do they know?
So I did it, it was premeditated. I did it on the night before I knew that I was going to be getting more auditing. And so I knew that she was going to ask if I had any withholds. And so I knew that I was going to have to tell her then. So I told her, and then she like ended it immediately and took me down to the ethics office. And then the woman there who I had been working with, like who had been trying to get me to sign these divorce papers, like came out and like looked at my arm and was like, "So this is how you're gonna fucking do it, huh?" And like slammed the door in my face. And like we had like kind of a contentious relationship throughout the years, but like she had been sort of becoming like a friendly person. Like we had been developing a rapport and this just like killed it. She was like, "Oh, you're not playing by my rules? Well, fuck you." And it was just like so clear to me at that point that like I only matter to these people as long as I'm doing what they want me to do. Because
absolutely,
like immediately, like as soon as they knew that, I was out. I was done. I was like shit in their eyes.
I was gonna say you can just feel the warm hug
Yeah.
up there, you know. Instead of, "Fuck you, this is how you're gonna do it," like you were doing something to her personally. Like this was about her.
Yeah, that's absolutely how it was. I was betraying every one of them personally and individually and maliciously. Yeah. So yeah, it was like that. That happened in the afternoon, and then like there was like all these throughout the day. I was like assigned to somebody to watch me 24/7, or like, you know, they could not leave me alone for a second. And I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone. Like I literally was not allowed to speak a single word to anyone. And like they kept bringing me back into the office, and I'd be like sitting in a chair with like 3 or 4 people standing above me, just like screaming at me, like, why did you do this? Why did you do this? And I like still at that time couldn't say like, because I want to leave. Like I was trying to get around it and say things like, because I miss Sage, because I just had this feeling and I had to do something. I was just really upset. But like they just really wanted me to say like, because I wanted to leave. And
because then they wouldn't let you, would they?
I don't think it would have changed anything. They just wanted me to hear it. Yeah, I don't.
Oh, they just want to,
because at that point it's policy. Like I'm a security risk because I might do something that looks bad for the church. So they had to get me out. That's policy. They just, I guess it was just like they just wanted to hear me say it. It's like one of those things, you know. So they, when you leave the Sea Org, they give you $500 like severance. So they took out of that $500, they bought me a plane ticket back home. They were like, okay, so where do you want to go? And I was like, well, I guess to my husband's house. And they're like, fat chance is actually what she said. She's like, no fucking way. You are not allowed to stay in the city of Clearwater, because his family lived in Clearwater. So I was like, well, to my mom's, I guess. So they booked a flight back home, and then booked a hotel room by the airport, and then took me back to my room to pack my shit. And at that point, I had like just gone missing in the middle of the day, and my boss was there, and she was like, where have you been? And I like wasn't allowed to say anything to her. But like she's like, what am I supposed to do? So like without saying anything, I eventually like showed her my arm, and she understood immediately what was going on. And she like gave me a hug and said, take care of yourself, and then just like walked out. And that was like the only warmth I got in that whole time. But then I got in trouble immediately after that for telling her, because you're not allowed to say anything to anyone or tell anyone that you're leaving. So then I was like yelled at for telling all these people that I had been planning to leave. And I was like, that's not what happened. You just saw what happened. Like, that's not what happened. But it didn't matter. It's nothing I said mattered at that point.
Or any other point,
and
really.
Then, yeah, really ever. So then I was like taken to the laundry room with my suitcase, and they like had me sign all these documents, and I didn't read any of them. I don't know what I signed. I know one of them was basically said that if one more report is received of me upsetting anybody in the church, then I'll be declared a suppressive person. I don't know what the others were. I assume it was like, you know, don't ever speak of this. If you ever say anything, then you're in trouble. But I don't know. And then they put me on a van, took me to this motel by the airport, and somebody had to stay with me until I got on the plane. And then from the airport, they let me call my mom. They didn't let me call her the night before. So I called her and was like, I'm gonna be there in a couple hours. Can you pick me up? Can't tell you anything else over the phone. So then I went back home. And I started trying to contact my husband. We still weren't divorced, and he wouldn't take my calls. But I like reached his mom, and she like tried to get him to talk to me, and he finally did, but he like didn't have anything to say. He was just like, he literally said like, I don't know what to say, and that's all I have to say. So that was the end of that. So we never talked again other than like legalizing the divorce. I got a job like immediately. I started working at Starbucks, got an apartment. Two of my brothers were working at the church, the city church that we like grew up at that time. And my youngest brother had joined the Sea Org at a different base. So I like went in to see my brothers who I hadn't seen in 4 years while they were at the church. And like everybody I saw there was like people I had grown up around, and they were all like, oh, hey, so great to see you. But then somehow word that I was there like got back to Flag, and the woman there called me and told me that it was completely unacceptable that I had been like hanging around the church, just upsetting people. And so I wasn't allowed to hang out at the church. And I was like, I was saying hi to my brother. Like, what? I'm not allowed to go in the church now? What the fuck? What do you want from me? And so at that point, I was just like, fine, fuck you. Like, you don't want me, I don't want you either. But my mom was still super involved, and my brothers were involved, and I didn't have a relationship with my dad. So I was just like, okay, well, I'll just fade out. I'll just act like everything's fine and stop showing up. And I like went to a few events, and I started drinking a lot. I had like about a year where I was just like working at Starbucks 40 hours a week and drunk all of the rest of the time. And there was definitely some overlap there too.
I'm sure there was.
Yeah.
Escaping what's happening.
Yeah, and it was also just like nobody's watching me for the first time. Like I can do whatever I want. And like I've done all of the good things. I've been a good person in all of the ways I know how. I've tried my whole life to fit into this like good role, and this is where it's landed me. So fine, I'm going to do everything bad. I'm going to do everything wrong and see what happens then. And honestly, it was pretty miserable, but I had fun, I guess. Yeah. But like throughout this time, I like still hadn't said that I didn't want anything to do with the church. So my mom was still like signing me up for stuff. So she like volunteered my services to like help this other girl, I don't know, who's about my age, 20-ish, who like was trying to like do some ethics program or whatever. My mom like signed me to like go spend afternoons helping her, and I felt like I couldn't say no, so I like kept coming into the church to like talk to this girl who's like doing an ethics program about smoking pot, and I'd be like, can we get out of here? I gotta go meet my friends to get drunk. But so like the double life like definitely super intensified. But I like wasn't examining the church. Like I was just pretty convinced that I was just bad. I was wrong. And like maybe Scientology was good and right, but I just couldn't fucking do it. I couldn't do it. And that was just the best I could do right then. Yeah. So then it was like about a year of kind of wild rebellion. But I also still had that like workaholic, be the responsible one, make it go right. So I was like doing well at work. I was like promoted to shift supervisor, and like, yeah, I don't know. Like I had my shit mostly together, even though I was like falling apart inside. And then I decided to like go to college. I I told my mom that I wanted to go to college, and she told me I was wasting my time and money. I was
I mean,
like,
shouldn't you take another
well,
Scientology course? There's where your time and money should go.
but I wasn't
Well,
allowed to take courses because I hadn't done my ethics program for leaving. And also I had a freeloader's debt. So all of the training and auditing that I had gotten while I was on staff, I now had to pay for.
I've
And the
heard
bill
that.
they sent me, yeah, the bill they sent me was like $90,000.
Oh, fuck them.
Yeah. And I was just like, well, that's never going to happen because that's not a real amount of money. Like, you might as well have said 12 billion. Like, it's the same thing.
A $12 billion contract.
Yeah. So yeah, I wasn't allowed to do anything. Also, they don't want me in the church. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I like went to the community college with so when I was in this York, like I had done schooling, quote unquote, like I had gone to school on Saturday afternoons, and I had gotten my diploma, which I brought to the admissions office at the community college, and they were like, "What is this?" And I was like, "It's my diploma." And they were like, "This is a piece of paper that you printed out at home. Like, this doesn't mean anything." And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, I graduated." And they were like, "This doesn't mean anything. This is a piece of paper printed at home. It doesn't mean anything. This school doesn't exist," which like blew my mind. I was like, "But I graduated." So then I had to get my GED, and then I went to community college, and I did life. I still like wasn't. I was doing better. Like, I wasn't like mired in the depression and rebellion phase, but I wasn't really examining my experience or the church. I was still pretty sure that they were probably right and I was probably wrong, but I just like didn't have anything for it. And then my brothers started leaving. My middle brother left kind of dramatically. He was working at the church and then just like didn't show up one day, and then like they like couldn't get a hold of him, and finally like went to his apartment, and his roommates were like, "Oh, he moved out a couple weeks ago." And then like eventually like a month later he sent a Facebook message to my mom being like, "I'm in this state and I'm okay." Like, that's all he had to say, but he had just like gotten on a plane and left. And then like every time the church tried to contact him, he was just like, "Fuck you, don't talk to me." So that was like a really big deal. And then my older, they're all younger, but my oldest brother left shortly after that, and he just kind of like faded out quietly. So I wasn't sure where he stood for a long time, but like the fact that they left like meant that I was like, oh, maybe it's okay that I'm out too. And again, like I had been dating somebody who was like, "Scientology's fucked up, yo," and I was like, I don't know, like maybe it's fine. I mean, I don't want anything to do with it, but so we like argued about that a lot. But like one of the things that really stood out to me in college was having to back up my opinions, like having to write papers where I like stated something and then had to actually like figure out why. I had never had to do that before. And like this guy that I was dating, he was an arguer. Like he liked not fight, but he liked to argue about things. And I hated it because every time he asked me to back up my opinions, I would be like, "Why are you attacking me? Why can't you just accept that this is what I think or what I feel?" And he'd be like, "I just want to know why." But it like really felt like a personal attack. And like now that I've studied a bit about cults, like that makes sense. I get why I had that reaction. But college was the first time that I like really had to examine anything I believed and think about it. And that was really eye-opening. And then once I graduated, I did like the typical like summer backpacking through Europe thing. But that was also super liberating. That was like a period where I was like starting to realize that some of the shit in Scientology was fucked up. Like, not just I didn't want anything to do with it, but like it was wrong. And so like I was taking all these long train rides and writing, and started like pulling apart things like this circular logic, and how like Scientology is the only right answer because it says it's the only right answer, and like starting to like poke at that and question it, and like being away from everyone I knew and not having like an identity that felt like I had to adhere to, I feel like really let me explore those feelings and those thoughts without like fear of retribution, or like worrying that it was going to come back and bite me, or like my mom was going to like walk down the street and find me or whatever. So that was like when I first started like examining it, and I was 24. So I'd been out for 4 years at that point. And then a couple years after that, like maybe a year and a half or 2 years, I read a memoir about Children of God cult. And it was called Not Without My Sister. And I remember reading it and feeling like, this is so familiar. Like I hadn't come around to the idea that Scientology was a cult yet, but I was like, something about it is so familiar. And like, it's not the sexual abuse and it's not the things that they're saying specifically, but it's like the way that they control people and the way that these kids felt like they had to think and feel and act certain ways, and like the way that they tore families apart. It all just like really resonated. And I was talking about it with a friend, and I remember saying out loud, I don't think I could read a book that's negative about Scientology without completely disregarding everything in it, just like out of habit. And I like took that as a challenge to myself. And I read Jenna Miscavige Hill's book, Beyond Belief. And the whole way through the book, I was like, yes, that's true. That's true. That's real. That happened. That's a thing they say. Oh, I know that person, and that's how they are. And that just like opened the floodgates. Yeah.
I love that it was a memoir about the Children of God cult, that kind of helped to start opening your mind to some of the mechanisms and such that were used. And then you got to confirm that kind of by reading Jenna Miscavige Hill's book. It is, so for you, when you start seeing what you've been involved in, is it relief or is it really hard to take?
At the time, when I was like 26 or whatever, when I read that, it was really hard. I got super depressed and super angry. And I just like couldn't process all of it. It was just like too much. And I was, at the time I was living in the same town as my stepdad's parents. And I had moved there to help them out in the last years of their life. And so I was seeing my mom and my stepdad a lot more than I really ever had. And so we like had a lot of interaction. In a lot of ways we were closer than we had ever been, but then also like this was going on in the background, and I was like so fucking mad at her, and just like the way the church had not just treated me, but like had affected our family and affected our relationships. And like when my stepdad's parents they're the only grandparents I've ever really known, so I just call them my grandparents. So when my grandfather passed away, all of my brothers came for the memorial service, and my youngest brother was in the Sea Org at the time. He still is. But he came, and he and my other two brothers like got in this fight where, so the two older ones are out of the church, and we're out of the church at that time. And they like got in a fight with him. I'm trying not to use any other names. Sorry if it's confusing. Where they were like, if you were made to choose between your family or the church, what would you choose? And he was like, the church, obviously, which really upset them. And understandably, and I didn't see the whole argument, so I don't know. I've heard like 3 different versions of how it went down, but it was like this really big dramatic event where they were like, it was just like, he doesn't care about the family. Like he's just this brainwashed idiot he's like, well, they were being mean to me. And my mom's like, he's the baby, stop hurting my baby. Because he's definitely the golden child. He's like been in the field since he was 13.
Yeah, but the answer,
yeah,
that sounds right, doesn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, there's like all this stuff going on, and I was just like so pissed off about it. And I decided as like part of my, I was like, well, maybe I should like see a doctor, because I was like having these like anxiety attacks, and like it hadn't quite become panic attacks, but it was like, and I also didn't have a word for it, but I was just like super fucking depressed. And I went to a doctor and told her about some of this, but she was just like a general practitioner. She wasn't a psychologist or a therapist. And so she was just like, well, why don't you try Wellbutrin? And I was like, oh God, medication, I can't do that. And she was like, well, why not? What's the worst that could happen? I was like, my mom could find out. And she's like, are you an adult? I was like, yeah. She's like, okay, well, you can make your own decisions. And I was like, what? But what if she finds out? So I did try it. It was not good for me, so I stopped. But I did a while later. I had some ups and downs. Some things happened. Some years went by, and then had another like super depressed phase, where like I started having panic attacks, like, yeah, all night, can't stop crying in the bathtub, kind of panic attacks, and finally started seeing a therapist. And that was life-changing. I think I got really lucky. Like the first one I saw was really incredible. And like the thing that I remember the most is like, I just started like, telling her about things, answering questions, and like the look of horror on her face as I told her some things. I was like, oh, that's not normal, is it? Or like, that's not okay, is it? And she'd be like, that's not normal. And I'd be like, oh, I guess you're right. Maybe that's why I feel weird about it, because it's not normal. Yeah, so I've been seeing a therapist, with, at first it was like every week for a while, and it was just really, it was really good. I really needed it. There's just, I'm very I'm very functional. I'm a workaholic. I'm a lot better about it, but I have historically been a workaholic, and I'm accustomed to working long hours, and I can get shit done. I can pay my bills, and I can get through life, and I can appear fine. So it's been hard to often accept that I need help or that I need anything. But therapy has really helped with that. Helped me realize that I need help.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, what you're really kind of going through is, I mean, what you're describing is basically the stages of grief: denial, anger, depression, bargaining,
Huh.
acceptance, hopefully. But there's a grieving process. You're grieving the
That,
loss of an identity. You're grieving the loss of belief, grieving the loss of family, grieving the loss of a life. It's a grieving process, and that's what we all go through after leaving. We've Something died, and
mhm.
it was a huge part of us, even if it was an unhealthy part of us. And just coming to
Yeah.
grips with and understanding all the different facets of it, it's again, it's a process, and grief isn't something that you do and you check off the boxes of the stages of
Yeah.
grief and then you're done and it's all linear. No,
It's onion layers for sure.
it comes in layers, it comes in waves. It's something you learn to manage. You take it with you throughout life. You don't just do it once and it's done. And things come up and sometimes they trigger something, and it might put you back in the anger stage or whatever stage, right?
Hmm.
And you work on it and you work on that and come to acceptance again. um, you don't erase decades of brainwashing and conditioning and everything. They don't just go away because you walk out the door. These are
Right.
things that you have to work through, and it's a process and a continual thing. And I'm glad that you've been able to have some of those realizations and work through those
Yeah.
things with somebody, because it's really hard to do on your own. So I'm glad you have
Yeah.
somebody to work with you.
Yeah. So yeah, that was 4 years ago that I
Hmm.
started seeing a therapist. Yeah, so I was 30. Um, and so now I just see her on like an as needed basis, but it's um I've also been writing a lot about my experiences and my process of, yeah, I guess it is grieving, isn't it? I hadn't realized that whole pattern was that. Like I've seen it in, individual portions, like, grieving the childhood that I never had, or like grieving for the younger me or whatever. But the whole thing is, it is a grief process. And yeah, I've gone up and down in my relationships with my family too. My my mom is still involved. She's working for the church again. We had one conversation years, I guess it was actually before I started therapy, but like when I was in my full on anger phase. um she came to visit and like tried to like handle my upset, um which is some jargon. um but I was just like, this is fucked up. Like, do you see how it's affected our family this way? That's fucked up. That's not normal. And she'd be like, well, okay, you're right, but, and just like there was like a but for everything. And then like I told her about like the experience that I had in this York, like specifically with my husband leaving and with the whole pigs birthing thing. And she was like, wow, if you had just told me that was happening, I would have done something about it. And I was like, I couldn't tell you. Like, I couldn't tell you. I was not allowed to. That document would not have made it through the mail. That phone
Could
call
have
would
done
have been
anything anyway.
intercepted.
They don't care.
Yeah. And also, like, you don't have a fucking voice in this.
Who's she?
Yeah. And then she was like, well, you know, the lady who was leading the flag at that time has since gotten really weird, and she's left Scientology, and since Debbie Cook, who's another like big name who made a big stink when she left. Um, but she was in charge while I was there. And so she's like, well, Debbie Cook is, has really gotten really weird. So like, who knows what she was doing that like, management didn't even know about. And I was like, no, management was there. It was like the top people at Flag were in that room giving these orders and yelling these words. And she's like, well, who knows who was in the mail room who wasn't letting this get back to the top. And I was like, oh my God, you're fucking delusional. Come on.
There's
Why can't
always
you
an
just
excuse.
accept that I'm telling the truth?
Yeah, it's always an excuse.
Yeah. So we've like gotten to a point where I eventually told her, like, I don't want to talk about Scientology. I don't want to hear about it, and I don't want to talk about it. I don't want you to tell me anything about it.
And that's called a
If we
boundary.
can,
Something you
if we
can't
can
have
do
in a cult.
that,
Congratulations.
yeah. If we can do that, then we can talk on the phone.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can't talk on the phone. So I don't know. We're at this point where it's fine, and I'm like coming around to acceptance and forgiveness. I'm approaching forgiveness. Not 100% there yet, but I'm fine with that. Yeah, and I'm pretty close with my brothers who are out. I don't really have a relationship with the brother who's in. My dad and I have gone back and forth. We communicate occasionally, but like because we haven't really had a relationship since I was like 10, like where do you start? Especially since he's kind of started over and has a wife and a kid and
Yeah. Where do you
just
start?
living a different life.
You just start.
Yeah.
That's all you can do is try to get to know the person if they're open. It's really difficult. It really is. I've reconnected with some people from my past and it's been good, and other people it's not really worked out that well, and that has to be okay, and you do what you can. But it is, these organizations destroy families. They utterly destroy families. And whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, Children of God, you mentioned, the FLDS, whatever, there's just so many families that have been torn apart by it. And it's a shame. Is there anything you would say to people? If you could say something to people who shun you today, or just, treat you differently, let's say, even if they're not fully shunning you, like, is there anything that you'd want to say to them and wish they could hear?
Yes. A few things. I guess there's one is like, you are not as fragile as the church wants you to believe. Hearing things that don't follow the church's doctrine or that you don't believe is not going to break you. You can listen. It's okay to listen, and it's not going to harm you to listen. And it's okay to look at negative reviews and other people's experiences that don't align with your own. And if Scientology does have something true or real or is genuinely helpful for you, that's great. And listening to other people's experiences is not going to diminish that or change that. So you don't have to be afraid to look and to listen. Another thing is that the WOG world doesn't exist. There's just this world that we all live in. We're all humans. You are a human. I'm a human. You're not better. I'm not better. We're all people. And setting up this or following this idea of like there's us and there's them, and like we're better and they're unenlightened or they're bad in some way that we are above, is not helpful. It's not human. It's not, I mean, I guess it is human nature, but it's not helpful. It's not going to get you where you want to be. And then like listen to your instincts. if something feels wrong, if you see something or hear something or someone does something to you that doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. It's not because you are bad or you are wrong. And you're not a bad person for having questions or for having doubts. And if you disagree with something, it's not because you've done something wrong or you have a word you don't understand. It's because some of it doesn't fucking make sense. And that's okay. Like, it's not your fault. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Those are really good messages. Very good. You know, I appreciate getting to hear your story and stories of other people who didn't come from the world that I came from, because there's just so many similarities, and the things that you're saying there, you know, so many of us, I think, can echo the same thing that we'd like to say to our loved ones. And they also betray some of the lessons that you've learned. You've obviously learned some things since you've been out. So what's one important thing that you have learned since you've left that has really kind of helped you?
I think the biggest thing is that this illusion of black and white is not real. Like, everything is some shade of gray. No one has all the answers. We're not all the same. There's no like one path that's right or perfect for everyone. And to like not trust anybody who does claim to have all the answers. I feel like I've seen this in other people who have left cults, and I definitely see it in myself. I have like a tendency, or like I'm drawn to culty situations. Like, I was drawn to CrossFit, or like
I've got an MLM for you.
yeah, things like that. And like, I can catch myself at it now, but like, there's definitely an attraction to that. Like, we have the answers. Like, you can feel safe and secure. You can let go here. You can just let us take care of everything. And like, there's an appeal to that is like deeply ingrained. Yeah, so I've learned to be wary of that, and I think it's made me, it's like kept me safe in some ways, and also it's helped me appreciate people for who they are as individuals. And you know, this has taken a long time, and it's like pretty recent for me, but to like stop trying to see people as like, how can I like help or fix or change this person, and just like see them as they are and accept them as they are.
Yeah, we were really good always at the binary thinking. That black and white thinking is a cognitive distortion. It's distorted thinking, and it's thinking that leads us to seeing people as well or broken, and we need to fix them, right? And we have the one right way, and so we learn to stop judging people and to start trying to understand people, and understanding the breadth of the human experience, including our own. It's really helpful. I'm glad that you said that. So you've got your own life now after you leaving. What do you like or love about your new life? And is there anything, do you have any hopes or dreams now that you want to fulfill at some point?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I enjoy about my life out is just like the mental freedom of not being worried about like, you know, getting in trouble for everything I think or do or feel or look at, or, you know, it's like, for years I carried around an anxiety about like every little thing that I do, I'm gonna have to confess someday. So like, keeping that mental tally, and that like went on for years after leaving too. And I feel like I've finally gotten past that for the most part. And it's just so fucking liberating to just like do what I want and not feel like I have to be productive constantly, and like, you know, keep my stats up all the time, and like feel guilty for hanging out instead of cleaning the house or whatever. So that's been really nice. As far as the future, I mean, I've been out for 14 years and I've done a lot of things in those years. I like definitely made up for some lost time. And I've settled at a pretty comfortable place. I work as a nanny and I love it. It's a career that I just adore and it's fulfilling. I just got engaged. I'm really looking forward to starting my own family and like being able to build the family that I've always wanted. I I'm really looking forward to being able to give a kid the love and support and, you know, unconditional affection that I I feel like I didn't quite have. I'm not going to say I didn't entirely have it because my mom is still there and she still tells me she loves me every time we talk, but you know, I just want to be able to like have that family that I wish I had.
I think that's beautiful. It's honestly one of my favorite things in the work that I do is seeing people. Like right now, it's Christmas time. Jehovah's Witnesses weren't allowed to celebrate Christmas, so you know, on my Facebook group, you know, people are posting pictures of themselves and their trees and their kids, and or you know, people throughout the year had someone, a friend that I've made that he just left this year with his family, and he had just a picture of his little boy playing soccer on a field with other little boys. Like those are such beautiful things that, you know, I'm sure a lot of people take for granted, but for those of us who were never allowed to participate or to have a family that allowed us to be us, I love seeing people have children, have their own families, and have that opportunity to give their kids something they never had. I think that's one of the most wonderful things in the world, and it always makes me smile. So I'm really glad to see you have that opportunity. And to see your kids eventually, you know, have that opportunity to live a beautiful life out here in the WOG world, you know, just
Yeah.
living life and you know, with the opportunity where anybody is a potential friend or someone that you could meet and connect to, and to not have to have this us and them and everything. You know, you're changing your family tree, and that's a beautiful thing. So I'm glad that you'll have that opportunity.
Thank you. I am too.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. I really hope that it helps somebody out there. I mean, you know, it helps me just listening to it, just talking to you. I love getting to hear these stories, and appreciate your bravery in doing so.
Thanks. Thank you.